in Smiths Falls, 4 degrees. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Ottawa Public School Board says an anti-transgender protester has a small demonstration planned on Broadview Avenue this afternoon. The board says the act of hatred is upsetting and they're actively monitoring the situation. They do want to ensure parents and students trespassing by this demonstration on school property will not be allowed. Now, a counter-protest has been planned as well. The Stand Against Transphobia on Broadview right now, and they will be back again at 3 o'clock this afternoon. The Sam LaPrade Show will have more on this issue coming up from noon to 2 this afternoon. City News time 9:01 as the LRT is set to resume, if it's safe, on November 1st. RTG says it will have 7 trains ready to go and 1 spare for service on that Monday. City Manager Steve Kanata, though, says the resumption date may be sometime in the first 2 weeks of November. This is the latest in the transit issues for the city. The head of the Transit Commission, Allan Hubley, has faced calls for his resignation.
Even the ones that are calling for me to step aside, it's not because I've done something wrong or there's something that they can do better than me in this process. So I take that as political maneuvering.
Now, the full interview with Councillor Hubley coming up on the Rob Snow Show shortly. Now, your forecast. Here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Good morning, Ottawa, the Valley, Smiths Falls. It's the coldest morning so far this autumn, but we'll have lots of sunshine today and warmer highs, 17 degrees. Tonight, mainly clear and 8, and tomorrow, sun and cloud, high again 17. That's the high today, 17 degrees.
And right now, 4 degrees in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls. City News time 9:02. Opposition politicians at Queen's Park calling on the Premier to apologize for comments about immigrants, suggesting only the very hard-working are welcome in Ontario.
NDP leader Andrea Horwath is accusing Premier Doug Ford of what she calls trafficking in demeaning stereotypes, while Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca issued a statement calling on Ford's comments, saying that they are callous and divisive. Now, the Premier was in the Windsor area yesterday for an announcement about a local hospital, but then he started talking about Ontario's biggest problem being a shortage of workers, particularly in trades and construction. And he stressed that people are welcome to come to Ontario just as long as they're willing to work hard.
You come here like every other new Canadian has come here, you work your tail off. If you think you're coming to collect the dole and sit around, not going to happen. Go somewhere else.
A Green Party leader, Mike Schreiner, says migrants to Canada and indeed to Ontario work hard and make vital contributions to our province. And for the Premier to suggest otherwise is what he calls inexcusable and only divides people. At Queen's Park, Kevin Meisner, City News.
City News time 9:03. StatsCan data shows 95% of police reported incidents of trafficking in 2019 involved women and girls, and 21% are underage. Megan Walker, the former executive director of the London Abused Women's Centre, and City News reporter Cristina Howorun traveled to London to examine the trafficking hub in Canada.
There are people working outside of the system.
That's too close to danger. We could lose her.
Fighting to save lives.
Look at this. She's trapped in her room.
Against impossible odds.
I'm with Cristina Howorun, and we've got a situation here.
We believe trafficking is happening in this hotel right this second.
The documentary Veracity, Fighting Traffic debuts next Tuesday evening at 10 on City TV. Cristina Howorun will be on the Rob Snow Show this morning at 11:30. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
When the headlines say X,
he's got the Y.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So I see we've reached that time when we have to start saying plus or minus before the temperature. Plus 5? Bit of a bite in the air this morning. It should be a grand day and all, 16 degrees today. David will golf in 16 degrees. You bet he will. A month ago, it was plus 20. 2 months ago, it was 29 degrees. 29 degrees. Meantime, I had a fire in my wood stove last night. I just couldn't hold out any longer. Good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. We are always so thrilled when you make that decision to spend some time with us here at City News. I think it's going to be time well spent today. There certainly is a lot going on. As we've been reporting throughout the morning, we have a special meeting of the Finance and Economic Development Committee for Ottawa City Council today. The FEDCO committee outside of council itself, this is the most powerful committee. All the chairs of all the other committees are on this committee. And this meeting is about the new library project. Massively over budget, mainly because of inflation in building materials, we're told. So they're going to approve, I would assume, coming up with more money to pay for that project, which is now upwards of $334 million or so altogether, $141 million more than the original forecast, and we have yet to put a shovel in the ground. So we'll be covering that today. The Joint Committee, Planning and Agricultural Affairs, passed the official plan yesterday. No big surprise, so that's off to the full City Council at the end of the month. And coming up tomorrow is a meeting of the Transit Commission. I wonder what they'll be talking about. You know what they'll be talking about. It is, needless to say, it's going to be hot, 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 because there has been no functioning light rail system now, if you can believe it, 29 days without light rail in Ottawa. And it could be another 2 weeks before there is even a sighting of a light rail train on a light rail track. Was that Bigfoot? No, it was a light rail train. Going to get you ready for tomorrow's meeting of the Transit Commission today with the chair of the Transit Commission, the Kanata South Councillor, Allan Hubley. Spoke with the councillor this morning. We will play you that interview coming up in just a few minutes from now. The professor is back. He's with us every Tuesday morning. Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. And let me tell you, I don't know if he ever sleeps, this guy. He's like the Energizer Bunny. He is raring to go. He started emailing me this morning. I am not kidding. Just to show you how dedicated he is to preparing for his weekly appearance on the Rob Snow Show, Professor Ian Lee was emailing me this morning at 3:38 a.m. What are you doing up at that time? What am I doing up at this time? Like 5 hours before his scheduled appearance, and he's already up and at him, and he is sending me material. We should talk about this. I've been saying this and this, exactly what I said last week, and here it is, and let's talk about it. So his big thing today is he wants to talk about ending the relief programs, the government relief programs from COVID-19 for businesses, for individuals. The clock is ticking on those programs. And the Trudeau Liberals are hearing it from all sides. The New Democrat, we want those programs extended. Others are saying, we want those programs ended. We talked about the looming expiration date of many of these programs during yesterday's show. Talked a lot about the CERB, Canada Recovery Benefit. Most of you, not all of you, but most of you, thought it was time to end that program. Think it's time to get past the CRB, move on from the CERB, that the CERB had served its purpose, and now it's time to, quote, unquote, get back to work. How many times did we hear that yesterday? Nope, get back to work. Talk about the labor shortage. It's a term that's appearing more and more in the American news media now, called the Great Resignation. What is happening now is the Great Resignation. Remember that song by Johnny Paycheck? Take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more. Well, more than 4 million Americans quit their jobs last month. A record for 1 month, like 4.3 million Americans. Take this job and shove it. And if you go back to April, it's more than 20 million Americans have quit. They want to do something completely different, because the pandemic has made them just totally rethink life and what they want from their working lives, or they move to other employers because of, say, better working conditions. Maybe they work from home, make more money. And as I mentioned yesterday, 730,000 job vacancies in Canada, and employers having all kinds of problems filling jobs, even offering higher wages like $23 an hour. The Great Resignation. The labor force turns in favor of the working class. We'll ask the professor all about that. Syndicated columnist Michael Taube, column in the National Post this morning, paying tribute to the late Colin Powell, former chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, former United States Secretary of State. We'll talk about that. And during the Talkback Hour, is it time to end all capacity limits for business in Ontario, no matter the business? Do a rapid poll on that today. We do the Talkback Hour every morning between 10 and 11. It's your hour. Phone calls and opinions, and I want to know yours. Because we're expecting, later this week, Premier Ford to make some kind of announcement about easing restrictions for businesses, capacity limits. To me, Fonzie has jumped the shark on this. And did the moment that the Ontario government said to the Ottawa Senators and the Toronto Maple Leafs, you can have sold-out hockey games. You can have sold-out hockey games, but the local restaurant is still suffering with capacity limits? It makes no sense at all. Given that move already from the Ford government, and where we are with the virus and vaccinations and hospitalizations, I will ask you, is it time to end all restrictions for all businesses in Ontario? This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Here at the Thirsty Maiden, we offer a variety of products. So everything from breakfast items, so it's breakfast sandwiches and scones, which have become a staple item here at the cafe. We have an assortment of pastries and cakes and desserts. So we're really big on our dessert bar, which a lot of people come here for. And of course, our delicious coffee beverages. So we do offer not your typical lattes, things like a chocolate banana coconut latte, cinnamon coconut, which is my favorite, and our take on even a pumpkin spice, which we add nutmeg and a dash of cayenne in just to give it a bit of a kick. When you start a business, you don't factor in all the things that could go wrong. You think anything that goes wrong, any failure, it's got to be something on your shoulders. You didn't market right, you're carrying the wrong products, you didn't price your items correctly, all the things, right? But when this pandemic began, things going through my brain were I didn't factor in a pandemic. And we were just starting to grow. We were about to blow up, and I think I spent 2 days crying. And then I shut my business down for, I think, a period of 2 or 3 days. And just being at home during that time, I realized this is not me. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a hard worker. I don't give up, and I'm a go-getter. And I started to think, well, I should probably just start clearing out my freezers and posting and seeing who wants to buy what. And that was sort of how I built my momentum back up. I realized that there's still a large number of people that wanted to support us and were looking for the items that I had to provide. So we started there, then I reopened literally not even 3 or 4 days after I'd closed my doors, and then started doing curbside pickups and deliveries, started doing the deliveries myself, free deliveries to the local community, going as far as Bell's Corners and Carp as well. And that's why we're still here. This community has really kept us going a year into the pandemic. We've had a changeover of staff a couple times now, and situations change, and when you can't offer hours for your employees, you don't blame them when they have to go elsewhere. So I think that's also been one of the challenges is recruiting, training, and then they leave, and then bringing in more people and recruiting, and anybody in this industry will tell you that that's something we deal with on a regular basis, whether or not COVID's in the mix or not, but more so now because every time there's a lockdown, there's a risk of, will we make it through? And then you lay off more staff, and again, their situations and their circumstances change.
Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
1011 FM and 1310 AM.
We now know that public transit riders might be able to ride light rail again in about 2 weeks. So let's get the very latest on what's going on with our public transit system from the chair of the Transit Commission, Kanata Area Councillor Allan Hubley. Good morning, Councillor.
Good morning, Rob.
So there is this date that is in the news, hopeful for a partial return to service with up to 7 trains plus 1 spare by Monday, November 1st. What has to happen between now and November 1st?
Well, I'll tell you the steps that will happen. Tomorrow, Transit Commission, we're going to have a full briefing on this from representatives of RTG, RTM will be there. TRA, the firm, the independent firm that we hired to come in and review this plan to go back to service and to make sure that everything is good, do we need to add anything to that plan, et cetera. We'll have all that taking place tomorrow, as well as the city manager will be there, and the new general manager for transit services will all be in attendance at the Transit Commission. So we'll learn a lot more of the details tomorrow, and then the work that's going on behind the scenes to make sure that all the trains are good. We don't want to get to just 7 plus a spare, although that's progress. We want to get all the trains back in service as quickly as possible.
Yeah. So what do you want to know as the chair? You must have questions for these
My number
people,
one question at this point is what's been going on in the last couple of weeks to get us back in service? Have they been doing some form of a check over of all the trains to make sure they're ready? I know they couldn't do the full check because we had to wait to get that information about what needed to be done, like, is there certain bolts that they need to check on the train, that kind of stuff. So they couldn't complete the full check, but they could have been doing quite a bit of work with these trains while they were in the garage.
Okay.
So that's one of the things I want to learn tomorrow. I want to know, how much testing is recommended before we go back in service. How many times back and forth on the track do we need to run each train before we're comfortable with them being in service and taking our ridership? Because we don't want to start the service up on November 1st and shut it down on the 2nd.
No, of course not. It's not just a light rail issue, really, because it has this ripple effect throughout the entire public transit system. And we've seen it causes a great deal of strain on the bus service because R1 bus service has to be marshaled in, and that causes a decline in the availability of buses for other routes. What progress has been made on shoring up the bus side of the transit system right now? For example, there have been calls to go out and get some more buses, but how feasible is that? Things like that, Councillor.
Not very feasible at this point. R1 is supposed to be a temporary service brought in for, if the system's down for a couple of days a week. It was never designed to run as long as we're asking it to run in this shutdown. So yes, absolutely, there's been lots of inconveniences. We're hearing about the crowded buses. We're hearing, and this goes to why the decision to go to LRT in the first place. We're hearing how much longer it takes people to get across town now when they have to use a bus versus a train. So as much as I appreciate it, I hear from people that say, get the trains back on the tracks. It's making my day longer. So that's our goal, is to get them out there. Now, your question to do with the buses, we're going to have to review that as part of the budget process and decide, okay, should we be buying more buses so that we can supplement that service? Because right now, when we create the R1 service, what we do is we're pulling buses from routes all across the city. So, trips get canceled, that kind of thing, so that we can feed buses into the R1. So should we make a decision that we need to buy a few more buses to prop that up so that it doesn't have as huge an impact on the ridership? That'll be an interesting discussion.
All right, okay. What do you know about repairs that have been done since this latest derailment? Not just to the affected trains themselves, but also the infrastructure, the tracks, the station platform. What do you know about that, Councillor?
Not a lot, but it's what we want the answers on tomorrow. So tomorrow we will learn, are the repairs all done? If not, how much longer will it take to repair that section of track?
Yeah.
And, what exactly is going on there? There's been rumors swirling that, they can't get parts and stuff like that. I've been assured that they have all the parts that's needed. There's nothing that's back ordered to February, which was one of the statements that had been made a couple of weeks back. So I have confidence that they have everything they need to repair that. I just don't know had they completed that repair yet, but I expect that answer tomorrow.
Well, I'm not surprised that those rumors are circulating. I mean, supply chain disruptions causing shortages. I mean, there's shortages of everything, right? So you can understand why people would be concerned.
We're dealing with global companies here, so if the parts exist somewhere, they have the ability to get them.
All right, okay. Why did you not want a judicial inquiry into all of this, opting instead for an Auditor General's investigation?
Because I didn't see what we were going to get out of it at the end of it, like waiting that long. I'm sorry, I'm a bit impatient with this. I've been dealing with this now for a couple of years, as has the ridership of the system. I don't want to wait 2 or 3 years to get some answers, and I'm not sure that judicial inquiry can give us the answers that most people want. So I wanted to support ways of getting those answers quickly, and I wanted to have multiple ways of looking at it. So I like the idea that the AG, the Auditor General, is going to come in and do her review. I believe she's already started. I've got a couple of emails from her that indicate that she's gearing up, ready to go here. We also have this company TRA that is looking at things for us. There's the McDonald report that the city manager said last week he'll be releasing publicly. So we've got a bunch of independent efforts underway already that should give us a lot of the information that people are looking for.
Okay.
So I didn't see the need to go. I saw the judicial inquiry piece, Rob, to be very blunt. I saw that as political maneuvering, and I don't think our riders want to be pawns.
Well, there was a lot of political maneuvering happening at that city council meeting, Councillor. You know that. No doubt about that. The City of Ottawa's vaccination policy requires all employees, contractors, students, and volunteers working for the City of Ottawa to be fully vaccinated by November 1st. Now, Clint Crabtree, the president of the Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 279, has told me there could be as many as 500 OC Transpo workers facing suspension because they don't want to be vaccinated. So what's going to happen to those workers?
Well, the first thing is we got to look into why that would be. Like, for example, we know there's logistical issues, such as they've got to go online to provide their vaccine status, upload the information. Some of the people that Clint's referring to may not be able to do that quite as easily as others. So we got to make sure that they have the support to do all this, to provide that information, get it in the system. That's probably going to make a big dent in that number. Are there some that are medically qualified to be exempted from it? Well, okay, that's information that can be provided, and exclusions can be made, or accommodations can be made for that. And then the piece at the end will be the ones that just don't want to get vaccinated.
Yeah, so what would you do with them? Would you actually fire those people? Would you put them on unpaid leave?
I think it'll be a progressive move. Like at first it's going to be suspension and then moving towards dismissal. Like there's a process that'll have to take place there. But, Rob, we're in a city where 90% of the people are vaccinated. So if you don't want to be one of those people vaccinated, the evidence is showing us that you not only put yourself at risk, but you're putting others at risk. And, we took every step possible during COVID to protect our riders and our employees. So we have to continue that. We have to continue cleaning the buses, taking all the steps. The barriers are all installed to protect the drivers.
Yeah.
But we can't protect drivers from other drivers unless we have this vaccination policy. And I think the citizens of Ottawa have clearly spoken at 90%.
Sure.
They want everybody vaccinated.
Mr. Crabtree was of the opinion that if his members have to be fully vaccinated, then maybe all the passengers should have to be fully vaccinated who ride OC Transpo. What would you think of that?
Well, I think we're pretty close to that at 90% of the population being vaccinated. But if he's referring to some sort of system to check each driver, then
check each passenger. To check each passenger.
Well, that's going to cause a lot of delays in the system, but certainly our city is moving towards a place where everybody's going to be vaccinated if you're out in public places like that. So
okay,
I can't tell you this moment what that's going to look like, but we're certainly I think the public is looking for and quite frankly demanding that protection.
All right. I have interviewed some of your council colleagues in weeks past, and they don't think you should be the chair of the Transit Commission anymore.
Okay.
They think you're...
Are they volunteering for the job?
Are you willing? Are you offering it, Councillor? Or
it's not mine to offer. It's an appointment by council. They voted for it in the first place.
Yeah.
I believe it was a unanimous vote at the time.
Right.
And what can I say, Rob? I'm doing the best I can. I'm working with staff to do everything possible here.
Yeah.
Nobody's told me that it's my fault that a train derailed or any of these issues. Like even the ones that are calling for me to step aside, it's not because I've done something wrong or there's something that they can do better than me in this process. So I take that as political maneuvering.
More political maneuvering. In politics, of all things.
In politics, you got to expect to see that, Rob. But,
okay. All right.
I'm confident that I have the support of the majority of council. I work closely with them on a number of issues, and so it's unfortunate that these councillors, some councillors, and they're a minority clearly, want to try and make it personal and make outrageous claims against others on council, but I'm just focused on, I want the trains back, I want them safe, I want our riderships to get the shortest commute possible in their day so that they have more time for their families, and I want value for the taxpayers. All those priorities are way ahead of dealing with political stuff like that.
All right. Councillor, thank you for your time. It's always a pleasure to have you on our program. We'll speak soon.
Thank you, Rob. Anytime.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Rob Snow Show, brought to you by Myers.
news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, October 19th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 5 degrees, Smith Falls 6, and here's what's making news. This hour was a small group of people gathering to counter a protest a single person held this morning on Broadview Avenue. The Ottawa Public School Board made aware of an anti-trans protest this morning before school and another scheduled for 3 o'clock this afternoon. Now, the board says this person protesting will not have access to any school property. The head of the Transit Commission says there will have to be a discussion on whether to buy more buses in Ottawa. Allan Hubley telling the Rob Snow Show, every time R1 buses are needed to replace the LRT when it goes down, more buses are needed, so some have to be pulled off routes in certain cases to make up for that downtown shuffle. An extra meeting for FEDCO members today at City Hall has begun. The members discussing the issue of extra funding for the new main library at Le Breton. The feds have already said they'll make up their portion for Library and Archives Canada in the same building. The city and the library board now have to come up with just around $60 million between them to make up a shortfall between the actual cost and the estimate from half a decade ago. City News Time, 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcoming back from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University for his weekly appearance here on the Rob Snow Show, it's Professor Ian Lee. Good morning, Professor. It's so great to have you back on this morning. Let's talk about ending COVID-19 relief programs for businesses and individuals. The clock is ticking on this. Most are set to expire on Saturday. You can bet everyone on all sides is trying to bend the ear of the finance minister right now, Chrystia Freeland, advocating their position. Some think these programs should be extended. Others think they should be ended. What do you think should happen with the COVID-19 relief programs?
I've been arguing since the finance minister tabled her budget in April this year with excellent graphs and charts and metrics and statistics showing that the economy, as she said, in her words, after each lockdown, the economy recovered much more sharply and strongly than the pundits, including people at finance, anticipated. In other words, there's far more resilience in the economy than the people who are charged with looking after the economy, managing the economy, understood. And the second point I want to make is the latest stats numbers that came out about a week ago, October 18th. I think it was October the 10th. They showed that we have recovered all the job losses. We're back at pre-pandemic levels.
Yes.
So you look at the finance numbers, the GDP is growing strongly. Everyone agrees. We've recovered all the job losses. So, in the words of Supertramp, crisis, what crisis? There is no crisis. And the numbers are showing that. And just one more point, Rob. Professor Korak, who is a very well-known, very progressive economist, was a very distinguished economist, worked in finance in the Labor Department, and then was at Ottawa U, and now he's at a major American university. He has a new paper out showing that they should not be extending these programs, the crew and so forth, all these alphabet soup programs, because there's no need, and because he said the unemployment insurance system can look after it. Well, that's exactly what I've been arguing for the last 4 months. Chrystia Freeland suggests, she doesn't actually say it, I'm not accusing her of that, but she certainly infers that if we end these programs, my goodness me, there's going to be no income support programs left for people that are down on their luck. We have never abolished the Unemployment Insurance Act. The Liberals did not abolish it. It is still running, and it is giving out billions and billions of dollars on its own, independent of the CERB and all these other alphabet soup programs throughout the pandemic.
But what about, so that's you're talking more, I think, about the support for individuals, right? Like the Canada Recovery Benefit, which started out to be $2,000 a month, and now it's down to less than $1,200 a month.
No, I'm sorry.
But what about What about businesses who are still hard hit by things like, business closures, lockdowns, restrictions, these kinds of things? Hard hit industries.
There's no lockdowns left. Okay.
Wage subsidies, the 75% wage subsidy, rent relief. These should those be? They should end too. Really?
They're over $100 billion, and what we're doing. First off, the lockdowns have ended. Okay, and I'm not. Let's be very clear. I'm going to be very blunt, so people won't accuse me of being misleading. Yes, there are some companies out there doing very badly, and they're probably going to fail. They're zombie companies. What in the language of that's been used in other recessions, a zombie company is a company that's hanging on. It hasn't failed, hasn't closed its doors, but it has no likely probability of survival. And so they just hang on by their fingernails. And the people think, and politicians talk about bankruptcy as a terrible thing. It's a horrible thing. No, it's not. It was one of the most brilliant innovations in the history of capitalism. Because once upon a time in the day of Charles Dickens 100-odd years ago, you put people in jail who couldn't pay their bills. And then we said, no, that's a really dumb idea. Why don't we allow them to go through an orderly transition through a bankruptcy process, and their debts are absolved, and those assets are sold off to other companies that can use them much more productively. So keeping zombie companies that are deeply inefficient in business is not doing any good for anybody. And what we're now doing, if we keep on paying out the $100 billion plus in subsidies to business, all we're doing, I think, is we're going to be largely keeping alive companies that are essentially the walking dead. It's better to liquidate them, let those resources, and I'm talking their addresses, their residence, the buildings they occupy, the factories, et cetera, the employees, and they can be liquidated, and then they'll be recovered, hired up. We are facing huge labor shortages, remember, and they'll be hired up by the companies. And we'll save $100 billion that is not unnecessary because the pandemic is over. We're growing at 5 and 6% GDP. You cannot argue we're in a recession. Although I know Ms. Freeland said that in the budget, but she contradicted herself in her own words by bragging 2 pages later, oh, by the way, the economy is growing at 6%. Well, you can't be in recession and growing at 6% at the same time. A contradicts B.
Okay. All right. End it all, you're saying. End it all.
You can taper it out for over 1 month.
Taper it out.
Give notice so people know it's coming to an end. And then deal with those people who've lost their jobs, who still can't get them. You have this marvelous system that has been supported by Canadians for 3/4 of a century. I've been saying, by the way, the Liberals passed it, and that's unfair. I know the Liberals always say that. I went and did some research. The Unemployment Insurance Act was passed by Conservative Prime Minister R.B. Bennett in 1935. It was declared unconstitutional, so the Liberals tweaked it, got the provinces to agree to a constitutional amendment, and then they brought it back. But it was first tabled and passed into law by the Conservative Prime Minister R.B. Bennett. That's how long it's been around, since 1935, and it works very well, and we should return to that system.
Okay. Look, I had the chance to interview the CFO of Claridge yesterday. Neil Malholter is his name.
Yeah.
A few interesting things about housing and the official plan. And you and I have talked about housing supply, housing demand, drive till you qualify, all of these things, right? And you have talked about how zoning policies in the city of Ottawa are so prohibitive that they drive people further and further out into the suburbs, even outside of the city. So first of all, very interesting because, and this is the biggest developer in Ottawa, really now, for all intents and purposes. And he said the city, in its own official plan, is underestimating population growth in Ottawa, and therefore is probably underestimating the number of units that will be needed. Probably by as many as 30,000, 40,000 units, 30,000, 40,000 housing units, okay? And as well, he said that's going to cause the price of a house to go up by $100,000. Just that. And as well, I asked him, let's say, how much of government is in the cost of a house? And by government, I mean, all the fees and taxes and, general red tape that a developer has to pay to government, and then those costs are built into the price of a house. And he estimates it's about $150,000 now.
Yeah.
Per unit.
Yeah.
What do you think of what he's saying?
Well, I'm going to be critical of him because I think he is underestimating the underestimation.
You think he's going easy on
I think
it?
he is.
Okay.
And I am evidence-based, as you know.
Oh.
Scotiabank estimated...
Well, he cited you're citing the same study he is, yeah.
Across Canada,
yep.
we are short roughly 1,800,000 houses, 1.8 million homes. Okay, Ottawa's not the totality of the country. It's 1 million out of 38 million. Okay, so we can just work backward from there. That's the first point. So I was trying to be a little bit humorous there. I'm in complete agreement with him.
Right.
The second thing that he didn't say, and this is really, really important to everybody, is that at the very core of the official plan, there is a huge, I think, false assumption, and that is that the majority of the people want to live in the urban core. And yet, when you look at the actual where do people live, of the million of us, the majority of us, not me, but the majority of us live in the suburbs. Mm-hmm. And that's true of every city in Canada and the U.S., by the way. Yeah. And then the third point, when you look at immigration, because the city's official plan and the councillors agree that the growth is going to come overwhelmingly from immigration. They put an estimate of 80% of all the population growth will be from immigration. What they did not do is they did not go and look at the data from Immigration Canada, which I did do. And the data shows that overwhelmingly our immigrants are coming in through the so-called economic category, as opposed to family reunification or refugees. And the economic category is where you have to have all kinds of skills to come in. And increasingly, the people coming in through the economic category are so-called STEM graduates, science, technology, engineering, management. And where do STEM graduates want to work? Do you think and live? Do you think they want to live in downtown Ottawa and Vanier, or along in the Golden Triangle? Of course not. Where do they want to live? Where there's technology companies that hire STEM graduates.
Right.
And that's the west end of the city.
Sure. Kanata, Stipsville,
Stipsville, Barhaven, that whole end of the city.
Yeah.
And that's our future because of the technology sector, unless people believe that the government of Canada is going to get much, much larger in Ottawa. And I don't think any rational person believes that. If you believe what I just said, then the downtown is going to face very serious problems going forward, and that's going to completely undermine and I think kill the idea that intensification in the urban core is where the population's going to go. If the government's going to be downsizing, not growing bigger, then there's going to be less people wanting to live in the urban core, and that's going to undermine this conceit or this belief by the environmentalists and the councillors that growth is going to take place in the urban core. I'm arguing because most of our immigrants are STEM graduates, they're going to go where the jobs are, which in Ottawa means the West End, because that's where the technology sector is located.
Okay. Yeah, that's
it's
interesting.
Not the urban downtown.
Yeah. It's interesting as well because I had a chance to speak with former Ottawa Mayor Larry O'Brien, when was that, last week? Just about light rail, the failure of light rail. But he also expressed a lot of fear, as did Bob Shirelli, actually, the last time I interviewed him, the former mayor and regional chair. All of these people who have lived in Ottawa for a very long time worried about the future of downtown Ottawa, particularly because of the so much uncertainty about the federal workforce and what's going to happen to the federal workforce and how much of it is, first of all, going to be concentrated here in Ottawa.
Right.
If it can be decentralized, outside of Ottawa to other centers, and because of remote work and the federal government's drive to perhaps make that more permanent, right? So
I'm in complete agreement. I'm not concerned. I believe it's going to happen. I think it's inevitable.
Okay.
Unless, again, somebody has some kind of a strange idea in their head that the government's going to grow like crazy in Ottawa. I think that if one looks at the facts, it becomes very clear. First off, governments, all the leaks coming out and all the information we're hearing behind closed doors is that they are trying to move a lot of the workforce into remote work. And secondly, because this is the it's a liberal progressive government, they're going to want to transfer some of these jobs, or a good chunk of these jobs over time, to areas where they're not doing so well, parts of the country that's not doing so well. So downsizing, decentralization, whatever you want to call it, is going to really put a crimp on the downtown of Ottawa. And I think that that's inevitable. And unfortunately, our council and the mayor I mean, they've been truly doing a fantastic rendition of Nero for the last 4 years. You know, Nero fiddled while Rome was burning. He was playing the fiddle. And they've been fiddling around pretending that we can solve global warming. All of the world's global warming with scooters and, you know, bicycle paths and so forth. And they haven't faced this existential threat facing Ottawa. We're looking into the abyss, and they're looking away. They're refusing to look at the fact that we're heading into a future.
Yeah.
I'm talking the city of Ottawa that is going to have profound problems, because if that government downsizes, the government of Canada pays $500 million a year. That's $500 million to the city of Ottawa as payment in lieu of taxes for the space they occupy. If they start downsizing that space and exiting, which they're going to do, there's no doubt about it. Not only will there be a big hole in the municipal budget just from the loss of government payment for the PILT, payment in lieu of taxes, but it's going to just devastate the downtown of Ottawa and all the other tax revenues that were coming in and had high values because of the presence of the federal government.
Okay, look, when we come back, I want to ask you a few questions. Within the last couple of hours, a new column from you has been posted on the Ottawa Citizens website. It was just posted this morning. I don't have it in the print edition this morning, so I want to ask you about it, Professor, okay? When we come back, Professor Ian Lee is here, the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
I started, as I said, at Lester's Barbershop, and it was kind of, it was one of those things that it was just an opportune time for me to get into it, just because he had decided that he was going to retire after the fire, and then the opportunity presented itself that I could open my own shop. And so I went from a 150 square foot space on St. Patrick's Street to a 600 square foot space just on Beechwood to now here, and I'm in a 1,400 square foot space now. And I don't know, it's been an interesting journey, because, you know, you think that you're just going to be just you or a really small space, and then all of a sudden, you know, you've got 10 other people working for you. You're in a much bigger space, and even incorporating the boutique. Last March, when all of this started, I mean, we closed down a little bit earlier than everybody else, and I'm going to say, you know, being honest, part of it was social pressure. We shut down before everybody else did, and I'm watching all these other salons, you know, just be really responsible and say we don't want to be a part of the process. So we got ahead of it and closed, and then, you know, the week later, the government's like, everybody's shutting down. And so it was a little nerve-wracking. I guess the first step of us, you know, trying to innovate and just keep moving forward was when the salon is closed, right? It's like, what do you do? Our whole industry is based on being with people, cutting their hair, providing a service. You have to be people together to do that. You can't do that remotely at all. So one of the first things that I saw in our industry, what people were trying to do was they were selling their hair products that they had. And luckily, I've had a website that always had a web store in the back. I just never used it. So as soon as I saw that people were doing that, I was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to load up all my stuff. And so that worked out really, really well. And then from there, I managed to find a place that was like a wholesale website that allowed you to have net 60 days. So you don't have to, you can order all the stuff. You don't have to prepay any of it. There's free returns, all that. So that made it really easy for me to bring in other products and start trying to sell it. And so I went from selling hair products to shave products to bath and body products to a little bit of clothing and jewelry, and now it's just morphed into this whole, like, I want to make it a whole legit boutique. And by December of last year, I decided that this is a full-fledged thing, and we're going to separate it. It's its own company. So it's really finding an opportunity that's there and running with it. So it's been really fun. Our clients are loving it. Our clients that have been here for a long time, they love it.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
We're back with Carleton University professor from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton, Professor Ian Lee. A great column this morning. It's very interesting. A look kind of into the rearview mirror and the history, the vision of what was supposed to be kind of an integrated national capital region, taking in the Gatineau side and the Ottawa side. And you're saying all of these decades later, Gatineau is what, Professor? Excluded?
Not excluded, but they're certainly getting the short end of the stick.
The short end. Okay, explain. Please explain. Please explain.
It was, as you know, I'm an empirically based guy. I love doing research. I really do. And research to me doesn't mean the same as to some professors. Other professors say, well, it means looking up what some other article of some other professor was. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's very legit. But for me, empirical research means going through actual statistical records or government records of decision, because they're legal records. And so I knew that as I started looking at this, I knew, of course, I was 15 years old when Pierre Trudeau was elected. So I wasn't. I vividly remember when he was elected at Lansdowne Park, by the way, at the Liberal Convention.
At the Liberal Convention, sure.
And he appointed his very close friend, Jean Marchand, who was a Labour leader. He was a giant of a cabinet minister compared to the nobodies that we have in today's cabinet. And that's Pierre Trudeau's phrase, by the way, nobodies.
Right. Is that empirical as well? Nobody.
And so I was really, really curious. And I was looking into this because I want to know, what was the policy? And because the wonderful thing about doing government research, public policy research, especially in a country like Canada, in the last 50 years, 60 years, is there's records. We're not like Putin's Russia where, he's walking down the hall to go to the bathroom or something and he issues an order and 10 seconds later it becomes a law of the land. We're not like that. We're evidence-based in this country. You just don't make decisions without a record. So I knew there were cabinet documents that started the transformation of Gatineau, then called Hull, now Gatineau, in 68. And so it was just a question of finding them. And lo and behold, I came across, it was fascinating reading them, 13 different cabinet documents recording decisions expropriating land in the downtown to create the Place du Portage buildings and to create the filtration system and on and on and on. It was really, really fascinating because you're going back in time and you're reading the voice of Jean Marchand. Okay, he probably had minions that wrote it, but they were certainly writing his views down. And he had a very clear vision about integrating Hull, it was then called, into the National Capital Region. And then that drove me back even further, very quickly, into the Bilingualism, Biculturalism Commission, which is a famous royal commission in the early 60s. And it really went on a jag about, Gatineau and the French Canadians have been screwed. Basically, they didn't use that word, of course, and how they've been really discriminated against by serial decisions from 1867 right down to the present. And the Royal Commission on Bilingualism and Biculturalism was co-chaired by two people, one of whom was Davidson Dunton, the president of Carleton University. No kidding. And they were very scathing in the treatment of the Quebec side of the national capital. And so they were the ones that recommended 25%. And then just to finish this story off, I started looking at it, and Public Works ever since then has been administering this commitment made by the government of Canada, by Pierre Trudeau's government, saying we're going to 25% of the buildings in terms of square meters will be on the Quebec side, and 75% will be on the Ottawa side. Right. So I looked at it, and they showed the numbers, and they said 75, 25. But I saw there were all kinds of buildings not on that list. So I started scratching my head, and I said, something's not here. There's something missing. I was a detective, but I didn't. So I kept looking, and then I came across Treasury Board, which deals with I don't want to get in the weeds here, but they deal with the whole of government, not just the core of government. Okay. And they're showing all kinds of buildings on the Ontario side, the Ottawa side, that are not in the Public Works list. And so when I ran the numbers, in fact, Ottawa has almost 82% of the square meters. You can say, well, what's another silly 6%? It's 400,000 meters. And when you remember, government pays...
Of government office space, basically.
Of government office space, owned or rented.
Owned or leased.
And remember, the government of Canada pays every municipality across the country a payment in lieu of taxes for every square meter that they occupy. So Gatineau, the city of Gatineau, is being shortchanged millions and millions of dollars that are flowing into Ottawa, the city of Ottawa, instead of city of Gatineau.
Interesting. Yeah, it's very easy. I encourage people.
MPs will be up in arms right now.
Yeah, it just went up this morning at the Ottawa Citizen website about 7 o'clock this morning. So encourage people to read it. Professor Ian Lee in the newspaper today. Very cool. I want to ask you what do we got? 90 seconds here. Okay. Yeah. You can have an NHL game sold out in Ontario. Okay. They haven't been sold out, but it's allowed. It's allowed. So given that it's allowed, should all capacity limits in all businesses be ended in Ontario?
I do think they should. Yes, I do. Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I mean, you can't. I just don't see how you can justify. You got 20,000 people sitting side by side, shoulder to shoulder for 3 or 4 hours, and saying, well, you don't need capacity limits there, but you do when you go into Canadian Tire. I mean, actually, if you think about it, it should be the other way around. People that go into any store, you don't stay there for 4 hours shoulder to shoulder with somebody. When I go into Home Depot or Canadian Tire or any store, I'm in and I'm out. And that's typical anybody.
Yeah.
You whip in, you have your list, you have your things to buy, you're there 10, 15 minutes, you're out. I'm not trying to say that 10 or 15 minutes is magical. I'm just saying if you can sit beside somebody in a hockey arena for 4 hours and you're literally rubbing shoulders, then I can't see the argument for capacity limits when you're walking into a Canadian Tire or a Home Depot or something like that, or a Walmart, and you're not even staying there for a long time, and you're not literally rubbing shoulders with somebody for the 10 or 15 minutes you're there. So there's a far more compelling argument for no capacity limits in the stores than there is for football or hockey games.
Okay. Great to hear from you. Talk to you next week.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. The Talkback Hour is coming up next, and we're going to pick up right where Ian Lee left off on capacity limits and whether they should be ended. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
WW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smith Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, October 19th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Stand Against Transphobia held a rally this morning. It started just before 9 o'clock on Broadview. They are countering a person on that street today who was arguing children don't have the capacity to make a decision on their gender. Councillors Catherine McKenney and Jeff Leap are among those who are protesting the protester. One person thanking Leaper on Twitter and the rest of the community who showed support for trans children. Now, the public school board says it was made aware in advance of this protest and said no trespassing on school property would be permitted. The same players are expected to be on Broadview again this afternoon at 3 o'clock. City News time 10:01. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Good morning, Ottawa, the Valley, Smiths Falls. It's the coldest morning so far this autumn, but we'll have lots of sunshine today and warmer highs, 17 degrees. Tonight, mainly clear and 8, and tomorrow, sun and cloud, high again 17. That's the high today, 17 degrees.
And right now in Ottawa, 5 degrees. It's 6 in Smiths Falls. We could see light rail back on the tracks by November 1st. That is, if all goes well. City News reporter Chris Curries with reaction from the chair of the Transit Commission.
The Confederation line has been out of service since September 19th, and we learned yesterday that the City of Ottawa expects partial service to resume next month. Transit Commission Chair Allan Hubley with what he'd like to know by that time.
How much testing is recommended before we go back in service? How many times back and forth on the track do we need to run each train before we're comfortable with them being in service and taking our ridership?
Hubley adds the city appreciates that simply bus service right now is inconvenient for many and plans to review during the budget process whether buying additional buses would make sense. A full briefing on the LRT issues will take place at the Transit Commission meeting tomorrow. Chris Curries, City News.
The latest COVID-19 numbers in Ontario just coming in right now. 328 new cases today. Of that number, 20 of them are in Ottawa. Just 2 in Eastern Ontario's health unit, 1 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and no new cases today in Renfrew. Now, people who attended recent wedding events at a couple of separate locations in Mississauga are being told get tested for COVID due to exposure there. This comes from Peel Public Health, advising anyone who attended Red Rose Convention Centre on October 8th and Candles Banquet Hall on October 9th. Individuals who are not fully vaccinated have to self-isolate until they receive a negative test result. People who are fully vaccinated do not have symptoms do not need to self-isolate. Megan Walker, recently retired executive director of the London, Ontario Abused Women's Centre over a decade ago. She expanded the centre's focus from victims of domestic abuse to advocating for and supporting victims of male-dominated violence, including sex trafficking. Over the course of several weeks, Walker took City News reporter Cristina Howorun for a tour of local trafficking hotspots in London, massage parlors, hotels, and neighborhoods where victims are often forced to work.
So this whole stretch is big for trafficking.
Every day in Canada, someone somewhere is being trafficked for sex.
You see the window next to the staircase? That's the bedroom.
It happened to me out of that room.
I was a different kid when I left that room. I was totally broken.
The television service's Veracity Fighting Traffic debuts on October 26 at 10 o'clock on City TV. Now, reporter Cristina Howorun will be on the Rob Snow Show this morning, coming up at 11:30. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Getting my scorecard out. Keep track again in this hour. See where you are on another hot issue here during the Talkback Hour at 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. Do you think Ontario should ease all restrictions, all capacity limits for all businesses? Given the state of COVID-19 right now, yes, no, why not? Do you think Ontario should ease all restrictions and all capacity limits for all businesses? Given where we are with the pandemic and given the situation with the NHL hockey clubs, the Ottawa Senators, Toronto Maple Leafs being able to have sold-out hockey games. 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. Look, I want to get ahead of this, okay, because there's going to be some news on this later this week. So I want to get a head start on the issue. I want to find out where you are, okay, just kind of in your headspace on this issue. of opening things up a little bit more, ending more restrictions here with COVID-19. And I want to start and see how open you are to this. Maybe you're not open to it at all, but this is why I want to ask it. Why don't we go for broke and end all restrictions? Just open things right up. Keep masking in place. We have the vaccine apps, but end capacity limits for all businesses. The capacity limits that are really holding back a lot of small business owners. What do you think about that, ladies and gentlemen? What do you think about that? Look, we've done a great job here in this city, across Ontario. Great job with vaccinations. We have vaccine certificates or vaccine passports. Yeah, you have the app on the phone if need be, right? And just given where we are with the state of the virus, given where we were in weeks and months past, do you think we can take a step forward here and end capacity limits for businesses? If you can have, I call this the Fonzie jumps the shark. Only people of a certain vintage will remember that. You have to have been around for Happy Days and Fonzie jumping the shark. But if you can have 18,000, this is a decision that the Ford government made. If you can have 18,500 people at an Ottawa Senators hockey game, and you can have a sold-out crowd at a Toronto Maple Leafs hockey game, you can now because of the decisions made by the Ford government, then why, oh, why? Heavens to Betsy, why, oh, why are we holding back a restaurant or any other kind of retailer with capacity limits? This has been bouncing around in my head since that decision was made because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's either safe to be in a crowd or it's not safe to be in a crowd. And yet the authorities seem to be saying, well, some crowds are safer than others. So what do you think about this? End all the capacity limits and be done with it. What would be your reaction if that's what the Ford government announces later this week? I don't know what they're planning. I don't know if they're planning to go that far or if they're going to go incrementally. But what if they went that far? Is that too risky? Is that too loosey-goosey? Is that taking too much of a chance? Would we be playing with fire like they did in Alberta? Or would you say, well, it's about time? It's about time, just given where we are with vaccinations, the key, other key statistics, number of daily cases. Can you get that number for me when it comes out today, David? The number of daily cases in Ontario today, if you happen to see the number of patients in hospitals, the so-called R number of the virus, the reproductive rate of the virus. Given where we are with all of that, do you think we can safely lift restrictions on the businesses that are still dealing with restrictions? 328 cases province-wide, 20 cases in Ottawa. Thank you, David, on the ball. Let's get right to it. David, line 1, you're on City News. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Do you think we can ease all restrictions, all capacity limits for all businesses?
I'm with you 100%.
You are?
And,
okay.
And for all the reasons that you've given. These businesses are struggling still, and they've been through a long time, and so many now have closed. Many more are at the rope's end. And when you look also at another aspect of it, they have the tracing thing, where a lot of places still have books, sign-in books.
That's right. Yes.
And to me, I consider that as optional. If I'm going through a shopping mall, and maybe within that mall going into 7 stores as I'm wandering around shopping and looking and stuff, I don't know if I need to sign in 7 or 8 times as I'm walking through a shopping mall. It's there. It's optional. I probably won't normally do it. If they ask, I will most likely comply, but I'm not going to just walk over to every book that I see and start jotting down time into the store, time out of the store, name, phone number, signature, and so on.
Yeah.
You know, but by and large, yeah, we need to give these guys a chance to survive before so many more of them start going on.
I mean, especially if the federal government is contemplating removing some of the business supports.
Yeah.
You're going to remove business supports but still hamstring them with capacity limits?
Absolutely not. We're far enough ahead on all those things that you mentioned. Vaccination, improving figures, everything.
Yeah. Plus, you know, I watched the hockey game the other night, Ottawa and Toronto. Toronto won on Hockey Night in Canada, but I couldn't make heads or tails of what the rules were in the arena in Toronto.
A lot of people not masked.
A lot of people not masked. Yeah.
But we definitely listen. Let's give these guys a chance to survive.
Right. Thank you, David.
Okay, thank you.
Glad you're well. Thank you. 750-1310. That's how it works. That's how we roll during the talkback hour. Joseph in Ottawa. Joseph.
Hey, Rob.
Yeah. Hey, Joseph. Do you think that we could safely end all capacity limits for all businesses in Ontario right now?
Yeah, I fully agree. I'm a 17-year-old high school student, so we haven't had a single restriction from 12 to kindergarten on capacity limits, social distancing, and that at school. So for the majority of the unvaccinated population throughout the entire country, there's been little to none restrictions and regulations on them, and they're also not forced to disclose or be vaccinated to go to school. So if there's no restrictions on the majority of the people spreading the virus, like the kids, which is what everyone's worried about, then why are there restrictions on businesses being hurt and adults that are fully vaccinated?
Okay, thank you, Joseph, for your call. Call back. Wow, a 17-year-old listening to talk radio. That's a new one on me. Francine, Orleans. Good morning, Francine.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm okay, Francine. Do you think we can end all capacity limits for all businesses in Ontario?
I sure do.
You do?
I sure
okay.
do. Absolutely. I think you're right. And I think we're all right by thinking that if we can go to a sporting event and be 30,000 people spitting at each other, yay and ray, we can certainly go to a restaurant and not have to count who's coming in and out.
Okay. Yep. Okay, Francine.
I drive a school bus.
Oh, you do?
I
okay.
drive a school bus.
What's it like on the school bus these days?
Well, you know, we still have these sitting plans. Of course, the kids have not had their vaccination yet, but think about it. Do you think if COVID gets into a school bus, it will matter if you're in seat 6 or 10? I don't think so.
I doubt it. Yeah, I doubt it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So sometimes, you know, there's a...
It's kind of like having a smoking section and a non-smoking section on the school bus.
Exactly. It's the same thing. It will travel throughout the 24 seats. So, you know, it's the same thing. To me, if you make a rule, you apply it crosswise. You know, it's the way it is.
Yes. Yeah. Wonderful point that you make, Francine. Thank you. We'll be right back. That's the first quarter down on the Talkback Hour. We're going to fly right through this hour, be over before you know it. Don't miss your chance to have your say on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Well, we all loved our rock T-shirts growing up, right? It was our badge. Hey, we went to this concert. We knew that band inside out. So we kept doing that and kept promoting that. What's sort of happening now is that audience is dying. I always say the earth is flat. So the 60s rockers are falling off the end of the earth. So you don't see as big a sales anymore because my audience is disappearing. What's sort of helping to promote that history is the kids are buying vinyl. And luckily we have a vinyl shop in the neighborhood here, Record Center. So what's happening is I've seen kids come in with their dad. And the dad say, hey, do you have any Beatles shirts? Do you have any CBGB? Do you have any of this? I said, well, why? He said, well, because my daughter's into it. She's wearing my T-shirt. So slowly it's coming back, right? The kids are, I think, getting fed up with the generic music that's out there. And they want to click into something that, first of all, links them to their parents, something that they thoroughly enjoy now, and maybe they're passing it on to their grandkids. Pandemic has been a couple of things, definitely hard on everybody. So much messaging that's out there that people don't understand, stats that every day. Jesus Murphy, like I'm getting a headache just reading this stuff, right? So really it was just trying to understand where we were going to go from there. The city of Ottawa all of a sudden said, everybody's got to wear a mask. You got to wear it on the bus. People were scrambling, okay? And I had, the store next door had really big windows, so I just flooded the window with masks. Well, that was the activity that saved the business. People were coming in buying 2, 3, 4 masks at a time at $20 a pop here. But my masks were so different. They were the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, Queen, all the pop culture. Everything else out there was medical masks. And right, so people said, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to show my rock and roll. So it became the new T-shirt as far as I'm concerned. Well, what I've done, I'm Hindenburg. I'm now at 1114A Wellington Street, which is next door to the Fab Gear store. And the reason I've changed names, I've rebranded the store, is because I was planning on retiring. And in December, I went, oh, I'm not going to retire. But I've committed to changing what the store's about. So I came up with a new name, Fab Gear's Rock Shop, where legends are dressed. And essentially get that message out. I prefer, if the shirt don't fit, you come in, you try another one on. People like to feel the fabrics with clothing. It's amazing. You'll come in and go, oh, I love that. Oh, can I try this? So that's the big difference. I'm not out to make $1 gazillion. I stick the way I am, old school. I take cash, we take cards. Come on in and talk to the owner.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
It's the Talkback Hour. Your hour. Taking your calls, gathering your opinions. Do you think all capacity limits can be ended for all businesses in the province of Ontario? We are expecting word along these lines, not necessarily going that far, but we are expecting word about the reopening map for Ontario later this week from the Ford government. And look, we've seen these plans before, and we've seen plans announced and plans ripped up and new plans announced. But whenever reopening plans have been announced in the past by this government, big, massive gatherings, like NHL hockey games or CFL football games, big cultural events, big rock concert or something, that was always last on the list, right? Every other plan that's been released by this government, that was always last on the list. Gatherings, events that attract tens of thousands of people. And yet here we are, and nothing against the Ottawa. I'm a huge Ottawa Senators fan, right? I don't like the Toronto Maple Leafs, but good for the club. It can have a sold-out show, a sold-out hockey game. Good for you, okay? But it doesn't make a lot of sense that the local restaurant is suffering with a capacity limit, in my opinion. Makes no sense at all. So given that decision has already been made by the Doug Ford government, and also where we are with the virus and where we are with vaccinations and where we are with hospitalizations, is it time to end all restrictions for all businesses in Ontario? 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. We have 3 lines available. The wait won't be too long, and we're keeping track, and we're listening very carefully. And you can bet people in the Ford government are probably listening carefully, too. They want to know your opinion, too. They listen. You know they listen. Ann in Ottawa. Ann, you're on City News.
Hi, Rob. I am 100% for opening up the restrictions, because for heaven's sakes, I mean, these restaurants, they are getting so creamed, because they make a lot more money when people dine in, because then people get drinks and everything like that.
Sure.
And they for God's sakes, they've been hammered enough. And if we want to have any kind of restaurant industry in the city, which I think we all do, right?
Yes.
They really, but it's getting ridiculous. I mean, if you're going to allow all these people to go into a huge arena, all these people to massive gather, and it sounds like the rules aren't even being followed about masking and stuff. Mm-hmm. How could they possibly control them, right?
There's right. How do do you enforce a crowd of 18,000 people?
You can't.
Anyway, right?
And that's exactly what happened.
I mean, the ushers and the security staff would be run off their feet in an event like that. Right?
No, absolutely. And the restaurants and the places like takeout places, etc., have been awesome at following the rules and having people follow the rules. So I think they really need help. And also, there's going to be lots of Christmas parties and things like that for businesses.
Oh, good point. Good point. Yes.
Yeah, they make a lot of money off Christmas parties, restaurants, right?
Yeah.
And it's right around the corner. So, hey, giddy up, let's go.
Giddy up, let's go. Okay, okay. Thank you,
Okay,
Ann.
bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Every line available there. Kind of surprised. I know it can seem like we're, gosh, we're on a roller coaster, right? It's like wave after wave after wave, and we open up and we close down. We open up, we close down, open up, close down. We're rinse and repeat. I can't go through this again. A year and a half of that. And so many businesses, they have been in this kind of holding pattern for quite some time now. But this decision, gosh, to allow sold-out professional sporting events, I think it's a tipping point of silliness. Because it just is so blatantly unfair. And it's just another great example of a government that seemingly just makes up the rules on the fly. And a government that is just spectacularly inconsistent when it does so. I mean, we were watching the Hockey Night in Canada this weekend, my wife and I. Leafs Sens, live from Toronto. Okay. Decent crowd there. I don't think it was a sellout, but pretty good crowd. And as much, and I don't know if you do this, David, this is kind of how I watch a sporting event now after the last year and a half. As much as I'm watching the hockey game, I'm interested in watching what's going on in the stands with the fans.
Oh yeah,
right. You just can't help yourself, right?
It's like a zoo exhibit.
Like, is it that person wearing a mask? Why is that that person's wearing a mask, but that person's not wearing a mask?
Hey, he's not drinking.
What's going on? Right. My own impression didn't seem to be any hard and fast rules when it came to being in the stands at the Leaf game on Hockey Night in Canada. Camera pans through the crowd, and some fans are wearing masks, and some entire sections, not a mask to be seen. I mean, what is the rule? I thought the rule was unless you're eating or drinking, you have to wear a mask inside a sold-out arena where you are allowed a crowd of 20,000 people. That's allowed. That's permitted. But our friend who was on the show yesterday, Dom Santaguida from Vittoria Trattoria, his fabulous restaurant is limited to 50% capacity. And look, okay, +5 this morning. Patio season is coming to an end. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And the Ford government has promised some movement on this. And, my fear is that when it comes to easing restrictions, it doesn't really have a track record of moving at lightning speed, right? It has never been in any great hurry to do so. I'm not necessarily advocating for it, but I just get the sense of how open you would be to it, easing all capacity limits on all business. And since we've kind of crossed this threshold now, we've said to the professional NHL hockey teams, you can be sold out, but you can only be at half capacity. How do you defend that? It's hard to defend that, in my opinion. Trevor, Ottawa. Trevor, you're on City News. Good morning, Trevor.
Good morning, Rob.
Morning, Trevor. Do you think we can end all capacity limits for all businesses? I'm open to having my mind changed on this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if they're not prepared to do it provincially, well, we need to start going with a regional approach.
Okay.
I happened to tune in. I was able to pick up AM radio in Toronto there last night. I was coming back from getting $1.50 a liter gas over at Costco. And
at Costco? Wow.
Yeah, premium, of course.
Oh, premium.
But they had said that there was 17 schools in the GTA that had, they called them breakouts of COVID-19 or whatever. But
yeah,
I have a feeling that, again, it's going to be the GTA that's going to hold us back. If they want to just look across the province, other than coating it all with the same blanket, I think we're ready to roll. People have been responsive. It's way overdue. The weather's getting cold. They've been the best, in my opinion, at keeping track of every time you go in there. They're professional. They follow the rules. It's time for us to open up. And even going back to, like you said, with the hockey games, how much sense does it make? The head coach is wearing a mask. All the players on the bench are. And then if a play doesn't go his way, he pulls the mask down.
He pulls the mask down and he starts yelling at the players, or he's yelling at the ref. Yeah. I saw that happen too. How many schools did you say in Toronto?
17. That's what
17, because I just Googled it here. Toronto District School Board, which is the largest school board in Canada. They have 600 schools, just that one school board, right? So, you know, there's some perspective, right? Some perspective.
Yeah, and what is considered a breakout? One case?
One case, yeah. One case, yeah.
So it's time that we turn the page on this and start moving on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Trevor. Yeah, bye-bye. All of that and $1.50 at Costco for gas. Mark, you're on City News. Mark, good morning. Mark.
Thank you, Rob.
Do you think we can end all capacity limits?
Well, I would put the question to the Premier to provide a scientific explanation of exactly what it is about being in a hockey game, shoulder to shoulder with other people for 4 hours or more, that is safer, less risk of spreading a virus than being in a restaurant or a store.
Right.
And unless he can provide a precise medical explanation, then we should no longer discriminate against those other businesses. One thing that bothers me is that the type of people who own NHL hockey teams and NHL hockey arenas are not poor.
No, of course
they're not.
No.
You know, mom and pop or small business people.
No.
Struggling to scrape by.
No.
And
no, it's a billionaires club, right? Yeah.
And I don't know of any one of those owners who have gone under, unlike a lot of our small business people.
Well, I mean, even with you would have to say the lack of revenue that's come into the Ottawa Senators, it doesn't seem to have damaged their ability to sign a player like Brady Tkachuk, for example. I'm not begrudging Brady Tkachuk for the big contract win, but they just signed him to a $57 million deal.
One of the things that has bothered me from this pandemic from the beginning is that there's been so many of these regulations that are contradictory and inconsistent that create inconveniences that, like for instance, and might be a small thing, but a local haircut chain since the pandemic will not take cash. It's debit card only. Supposedly that's to protect the employees that work there.
Right.
Well, their tips are in cash, but these same employees cannot ask the person who sits down in the chair in front of them that they must move in and work closely with about their vaccine status. I would think it entirely reasonable for a barber to want to have vaccination confirmation from anyone that got that close.
Right.
But they're not allowed to do that. Yet that same person cannot pay them cash because of the risk, presumably from cash, which is less, I would say, than the risk of an unvaccinated person coming and sitting down in the chair in front of you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. We're up against the news. Have to run. Have to let you go. Ian, Colleen, and I have a line for you. We're talking about capacity limits. News expected from the Ford government later this week on reopening Ontario. Should we be ending capacity limits and restrictions on small business in Ontario? Rob Snow Show on City News.
for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, October 19th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 7 degrees, and here's what's making news this hour. A group of people, City Councillors Catherine McKinney and Jeff Leeper among them, stopped someone from harassing queer and transgender children on Broadview this morning. Protester was greeted by a crowd with the same scenario expected this afternoon at 3 o'clock. McKinney tweeted to Ontario politicians, "We need a ban on hate speech outside schools." Ottawa's Transit Commission meets tomorrow. Among the discussions, maybe they should buy new buses. Transit Chair Allan Hubley says in event of LRT shutdown, buses have to be used for the downtown run replacement. That's R1 busing. But that can leave shortages on other routes unless the fleet is expanded. As for LRT, Hubley says he hopes it's back up and running soon, but also wants to make sure the system is running well first. The province says there are 328 new cases of COVID-19 today and 4 more deaths attributed to the virus. 20 of the new cases are in Ottawa, 2 in Eastern Ontario, 1 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark. There are no new cases today in Renfrew. City News time, 10:33. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Can we end all capacity limits for all businesses in Ontario? We're expecting news on that later this week from the Ford government. And already you can have an NHL hockey game that's sold out. That's allowed in the province of Ontario. Now, some people say, well, we should ditch the mask mandates. I don't think we should ditch the masks. I wouldn't do that until Vera Etches says, Rob, you don't have to wear your mask anymore. And I can't wait to get rid of the mask. Honest to goodness. But until Dr. Etches says you should wear your mask, I'm going to wear the mask. I'm a pretty compliant guy. But most of us have been fully vaccinated now. There are vaccine certificates now, a vaccine app now. What about some freedom, some progress? Would you be open to something like that? 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310, second half of the Talkback Hour. Alta Vista. Colleen, you're on City News. What do you think, Colleen?
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
I've never called in before.
Oh, I appreciate you calling today. Thank you.
I'm getting the feeling that most of the provincial government has lost their ability to utilize their logic in this pandemic. We keep talking about, does the science, support that thought process, and I find it difficult to think that science would support the reopening of 100% capacity at a sports event and not 100% capacity at a restaurant, as you mentioned, Dom from Victoria Trattoria. I've watched that gentleman go through hoops to meet the ability to maintain his clientele's ability to, to keep his business open. And quite frankly, the logic from the provincial government is lacking, regardless of whether or not there's scientific evidence for this, because I just don't see it whatsoever. So when are we going to get back to what is logical in this whole process? Because this is, quite frankly, very disappointing from a Ford perspective, and it's ruining the local businesses right at the core of what the neighborhoods enjoy.
Right. So lift them? You think we can go ahead?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, Colleen. Thank you.
Thanks.
Look,
bye now.
Yeah, bye-bye. The question period in the Ontario legislature is held every morning around this time. Doug Ford is getting it from all sides, as you can imagine, for some comments he made yesterday. So I do want to just pop into the question period down at Queen's Park and see See if anything comes of this morning.
The Premier straight up, where is the plan for vaccinating our children?
Premier is in the legislature.
Deputy Premier and Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and I can advise the member opposite that our government is ahead of the issue with respect to the immunization of children aged 5 to 11. We are waiting for Health Canada approval, of course. However, we have asked all of the 34 public health units to provide us with their plan, which they have submitted. We are going through those plans right now. We are using a variety of sources in order to vaccinate children of this age, and we will be ready as soon as Health Canada gives it a go-ahead. We will be ready on the ground to deliver those vaccines, so parents need not be concerned.
Supplementary question.
Well, Speaker, we've been calling for this plan since August. As we all know, British Columbia is already pre-registering their children to get the vaccines. They're making sure that their system is ready. Parents have some certainty already as to what to expect, but here we are still with nada in terms of information for parents about how their children 5 to 11 can get vaccinated. So the question again is, where is this plan? Why are parents still waiting to hear from this government? Why is it always last-minute information and playing catch-up with what other provinces have already done?
And the Minister of Health.
Thank you. Well, in fact, we are prepared for the vaccination of children aged 5 to 11. We know this is an issue of concern to parents, and we also know that parents would be concerned that if a child of age 5 is going to be vaccinated, that the parent wants to be with their child. That is only natural, and we're providing for that, whether it's going to be in primary care, whether it's going to be in pharmacies, or whether it's going to be in schools, not necessarily within school hours, evenings and weekends when the entire family can go. So this is something that we are preparing for. We are ready to go. Of course, the circumstances differ in each of the 34 public health units, and one size doesn't fit all. We know that. And so we are working with each of the public health units to make sure that they are ready to go, and we will be ready, and we will have information out to parents in advance of the time when it's prepared to go via Health Canada.
And the final supplementary.
Apparently lots of questions remain, and parents really do need to know. So I hope this government has learned from its inadequacy around previous communications efforts, and they are very clear and very early on letting parents know what the plan is, because that's something that we need. In fact, the other thing that we need is vaccines to be on the immunization list for schools. We've been calling for this since June. When this COVID vaccine for children gets approved, it needs to go on the immunization list. So my question is, will the Premier get ahead of that and actually make sure the COVID vaccine is on the routine vaccination immunization list for school-age children?
And the Minister of Health.
Thank you. Well, in fact, one only needs to look at our success with respect to the vaccination campaign for adults. We now have over 87%.
If the Premier rises, he's in the House, but he hasn't spoken to the issue that created so much controversy. David, do you have the original clip, David? The original controversy yesterday and we're going to get into this morning with Michael Taube when he joins us a little later in the program. Doug Ford on hardworking new Canadians and immigration levels.
We need people. And so, folks, if you have some hardworking people, I just have one criteria. You come here like every other new Canadian has come here, you work your tail off. If you think you're coming to collect the dole and sit around, not going to happen. Go somewhere else. You want to work? Come here. We have so much work, we can't keep up with it.
Collect the dole. Who even uses that word anymore? But sometimes the mouth moves faster than the brain. Sometimes. It's like he forgets where he is and who he's talking to, and he's like unaware. Hey, news cameras. Right here, recording you. Going to be on the news now because of that. All right, back to the phones. Thank you very much, David. Ian in Brockville. Ian, you're on City News. Ian.
Yes.
Yes, good morning, Ian. Do you think we can end all capacity limits for all businesses?
Absolutely. Now, just quickly here, should that young high schooler still be listening? Thank you for completing my week. That's a little bit of faith restored in humanity. That's quite a sharp young lad that called in the first quarter there.
Okay.
moving forward, as much as I do love Ian Lee inside and out, man's got some good points. I would almost break down your zombie businesses in almost two different sectors, because I don't know about you, Rob, but it's getting harder and harder to find a place that makes a good breakfast for a good price. And just outside of Brockville, a little area called Tin Cap, we've got mom and pa restaurants, Mike's Diner, and it's hard to make a dollar when you can't get a lot of people in there. And sure, we can keep doing what we're doing. We can have the arguments with the arenas versus the restaurants, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, there are certain businesses that are only ever going to be able to make so much, and it's only ever going to take a certain amount to bring them down. And once those businesses are gone, it's not like other businesses are much the same as them and are going to benefit from that. There are certain businesses that just need that clientele in there. And to conclude, we understand my thoughts on the vaccination by now. We know you're vaccinated. I think since there's going to be this disconnect or this differentiator between us as a whole as Canadians for a little while here, I think at the end of the day, nobody can complain with allowing that small business to want to do what it wants to do, because if you're that concerned about, I don't know, an unvaccinated person getting you sick, or if you're one of them other folks that thinks a vaccinated person is going to get you sick, you always have the end of the day fail-safe option. You just don't have to go out. But for those people that want to go out and fire up the business and want to go out for breakfast, for example, just let them do their thing.
Okay. All right, Ian. Thank you. Yes, it's we're coming up to the final quarter. Talk back hour. 750-1310, Rob Snow Show on City News.
I always knew I was going to own my own business, and I've always wanted to have a store. And I sort of figured when the right concept came together at the right time, I would move forward with that plan. And so through doing some environmental initiatives in the restaurant group that I was with prior to opening this store, it just triggered my path towards being more environmentally conscientious and wanting to make more of a difference, and hopefully encouraging, inspiring other people to want to do the same, at which point the idea for All Eco was born. I have some really fun products. I have a really wide spectrum of products. So the things we look for in terms of qualifying products are sustainably made, upcycled, recycled, zero waste, all natural, no harmful chemicals to like the environment or to our bodies. We have like fun stuff, so like really clean burning candles, lots of really natural body care and skin care. I put a real emphasis on Canadian products. I really try to support up and comers, and I always source Canada first. The refill bar is really important to me. It's really huge. I think that's been exciting as well, because I thought it was going to be a real process in convincing people that this is a better way to go. And actually it was just like right away there was a built-in affinity towards doing refill, which has been great. We closed, I think probably we were closed down by before the second week of March. Just didn't feel we could comfortably or confidently stay open, even though I do sell essential products like in terms of the cleaning. But we just didn't feel we could make a safe space for ourselves or our customers at that time, and especially with the information we had at the time. So we did close our doors, at which point I did not have a website, because I hadn't even scheduled myself to have a website at that point. So that was sort of like full speed moving towards that and trying to drive the business at the same time, still get myself on the map because I was so new. So during that time, as we were building the website, we were still doing a lot of video shopping and private shopping, online shopping, like online phone, text. Any way I could do business, I was doing it. And there was really a nice show of support for my business during that time, which was really, really encouraging. And now, we are fully set up online too.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Do you think the Ford government should end all capacity limits? Given the state of COVID-19 right now, vaccinations, cases, hospitalizations, and the fact that the Toronto Maple Leafs and Ottawa Senators can have sold-out hockey games. I was looking at some of the numbers this morning, all those numbers that we used to cite on a fairly regular basis during the awful third wave. Yesterday it was 373 cases province-wide. This morning, 328. So that's 9 days in a row that it's below 500. 38 cases in Ottawa yesterday, 20 in Ottawa today. 2 deaths reported province-wide. Okay. Among Ontarians 12 years of age and older, 87.5% have had at least one dose. 83% have had 2 doses, province-wide. And as for hospitalizations, again, all across Ontario, 145 people in general hospital wards in Ontario with COVID-19. Oh, sorry, we're going to interrupt this. Go to the legislature. Here we go. Go ahead.
Future. Many of whom
But the comments made yesterday by the
build
Premier.
This province. His words undermine the uphill battle that immigrants face when they come to this country, like the struggles my family faced when they came here with the hope for a better life. His words undermine the thousands of new Canadians who have helped Ontario through the past year and a half. So my question is simple, Mr. Speaker. Will the Premier apologize for his reckless comments?
Premier on his feet.
Please take their seat.
Seems prepared to apologize.
The Premier to reply.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Speaker. Let me just inform the opposition. I am pro-immigration. I have been pro-immigration from day one. We are short 290,000 people. I was the only government that wrote letter after letter to the Prime Minister saying we need more people. But when these more people come here...
I'm going to ask the member for Essex to come to order. I'm going to ask the member for Ottawa South to come to order. I'm going to ask the Leader of the Opposition to come to order. And the Premier to conclude his reply.
Mr. Speaker, we have 290,000 jobs waiting for people around the world. And I don't care where they come from, they're going to come here. But guess what, Mr. Speaker? They need a place to live. The NDP and the Liberals voted against making sure that we have affordable housing moving faster. They voted against making sure we build highways and bridges to make sure people get from point A to point B. They voted against the transit system that people will be on, the subway system, getting from point A to point B.
Thank you. Thank you. Premier will take a seat.
How much of an apology?
Premier will take a seat. Yeah. The supplementary question.
Thank you, Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Premier told new Canadians to work their tails off, yet thousands of highly qualified immigrants, and he talked about how we need thousands of workers right now. So thousands of highly qualified immigrants, many of whom are doctors, lawyers, nurses, professors, and with years of experience are unable to find work in their field because of the barriers to foreign credential recognition. Something I've talked about in this House many, many times. I have heard from thousands of many of these experienced doctors, for example, who in an attempt to use their skills and support the province volunteered on the front lines during this pandemic. And after trying to make ends meet with minimum wage jobs, have given up to finding work in Ontario and actually left this province, Mr. Speaker. If the Premier is serious about supporting immigrants, will he commit today to addressing the challenges that immigrants face and help foreign trained professionals find jobs in their field and make it easier for them to find work and actively actually contribute to this province? Thank you, Speaker.
And the Premier to reply.
Mr. Speaker, last night and this morning, my phone was blowing up on messages. And guess what the messages were from? They were from new Canadians, immigrants that came here, first generation. And they told me story after story last night. One story how their parents came over, their father worked in a gold mine to put him through school, through university. Another person told me the story about his first job was a dishwasher, but guess what, Mr. Speaker? He owns his own restaurant now and is employing 30 to 40 people. Another person told me that he came over and he took a job of sweeping up and cleaning up at a factory. Now he owns his own factory that employs 100 people. These are the stories that I hear. Mr. Speaker, all you have to do is come to a Ford Fest. You'll see the support from people around the world that come there. And guess what, Mr. Speaker? I'll tell you how Ford Nation was created. They came to this country. They couldn't get a hold of any NDP Liberal leaders, but they got a hold of the Mayor of Toronto. They got a hold of the Premier. We show up to their door. We return their call.
Stop the ball. Okay. Tapping into Ford Fest and the creation of Ford Nation. Isn't that interesting? Okay, that's the line of defense from the Premier this morning on his new Canadian remark, taken as an insult politically. But back to the question of the day on capacity limits. A number of people have called in now. Phil, Orleans. Phil.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Phil.
Getting a little cold out. Anyways, I think the restaurant should be the same as large venues like Senators and that. But I think at this point, it should only be 75%, not 100.
Okay.
You can't just open the floodgates and see what happens. And I'm telling you this because my niece in BC in Victoria, she has 3 girls, 12, 5, and 4. And my niece was double vaccinated. She got COVID a couple months ago, and she got rid of it. But now she has it again, and one of her kids has it. So this thing is never going to end anytime soon. So you can't just say, oh, everybody I think is complacent. And, well, nothing, it's not bad here, but bad is coming here.
Bad is coming here. Okay, so you would be cautious. You would be cautious.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, sir. Thank you. Okay. Fair enough, sir. Very valid opinion. Dave, downtown. Dave.
Hi.
Morning, Dave. Do you think can we end all of these capacity limits for all businesses right now?
Well, I mean, there's no, as you point out, there's no scientific or logical reason why we shouldn't. It kind of brings to mind about, do you recall during the original lockdowns when people were upset because places like big box stores, Costco and Walmart could be open, but the smaller ones who sold a lot of the things they sell could not be open.
That's right.
And it makes you wonder if this is strictly a decision based on economics.
Well, what do the optics say, right?
Well,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
in it for the little guy. In it for the little guy, Dave. In it for the little
exactly,
guy. Right.
Exactly. It's like 20,000. Well, we got to keep these hockey teams alive. We got to keep the economy going, and that's what it looks like to me because it defies any other reasoning.
All right, Dave. Thank you. Great comments there. Yeah, love the opinion this morning. Jeff Stissville. Jeff, you're on City News. Jeff, do you think we can ease capacity limits and capacity limits here in Ontario?
That's not really what I'm calling about. I wanted to call about Doug Ford's comment.
Oh, okay. All right, go ahead.
I don't think he should apologize. I think everything he said was great. I think that...
All right, see, I'm not on that topic. And don't tell the producer you want to talk about one thing and then talk about something else. Judy in Ottawa. Go ahead, Judy.
Well, I'm feeling the same as the man that just called. I don't think he's concerned about the taxpayers. That's why he was saying this, about don't come here unless you want to work.
Well, but he's perpetrating a stereotype when he says stuff like that. You know, the lazy immigrant who wants to collect welfare.
Well, I don't think he's calling them lazy. He's just saying ahead, please don't come and expect to sit around and do nothing, you know? Like the taxpayers are only bringing half their pay home now.
Yeah, sure.
So that's what I think.
Is this an enormous problem that we have?
Yes.
It is.
What do you mean about what?
What are we welcoming? What lazy immigrants to Ontario, Judy?
Well,
who just want to sit around and collect welfare, or what?
Well, we're only human. Yes, there'll be some want to do that. I know some right now that's doing that.
Oh, really? Yeah. Look, if there's lethargy with work ethic, I know lots of people who have had families here for generations who seem to be struck with the same condition, Judy. I don't think it's just. I don't think it's an immigrant thing.
Oh, no,
but I thank you for your call, ma'am, this morning. And that's all I'm going to say about that. All right, coming up in the final hour of our program. We have Michael Taube, columnist, Troy Media, Loonie Politics, former speechwriter Stephen Harper. He has a column in the National Post this morning on the passing of Colin Powell, the former U.S. Secretary of State, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It's a really good one. Dr. Gerald Evans, chair of the Division of Infectious Diseases at Queen's University. Shots for kids. COVID-19 vaccines for children aged 5 to 11. What concerns do parents have, and what should they be worried about, if anything? We'll ask him. And Cristina Howorun, CityNews investigative journalist, with a new special that starts on Thursday. It's called Fighting Traffic, about the scourge of human trafficking in Canada. That's all ahead. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
WW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smith Falls and the Valley. Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, October 19th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smith Falls, it's 7 degrees, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. The province says there are 328 new cases of COVID-19 today, along with 4 more deaths attributed to that virus. Now, 20 of these new cases are in Ottawa, 2 in Eastern Ontario. There's 1 new case in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and no new cases today in Renfrew. Of the almost 20,800 tests that were done, 1.5% came back positive. The province says it is launching one of the largest flu shot campaigns in provincial history. Health Minister Christine Elliott says the program will be available to the general public in November. Elliott says it is safe to receive a flu shot and COVID vaccine at the same time. Last year, the province doled out the largest number of flu vaccines ever and has purchased 1.4 million more than last year, with 7.6 million this year. Flu shots were made available to seniors starting back in September. Next month, they will be available for everyone in the province. 40% of the flu shots will be available through local pharmacies. A COVID-19 vaccine may soon be approved for much younger children in Canada.
Pfizer wants Health Canada to approve the first COVID-19 vaccine for children aged 5 to 11 years old. As soon as the regulator gives the green light, providers will be able to start offering the COVID-19 shots to kids. But the new child-sized doses might need to be procured specially. The doses are about 1/3 the size given to adults and teens ages 12 and up. Roger Ward, The Canadian Press.
City News Time, 11:02. Stand Against Transphobia held a rally this morning. It started just before 9 o'clock. Now, they're countering a person who was on Broadview arguing children don't have the capacity to make a decision on their own gender. Councillors Catherine McKenney and Jeff Leeper were among those protesting the protester. On Twitter, one person who has a trans child going to school along that street thanked Leeper and the rest of the community who showed support for trans children. The Public School Board says it was made aware in advance of this protest and said no trespassing on school property would be permitted. The same people are expected to be back on Broadview again this afternoon at 3 o'clock. Light rail will be returning to service at some point next month for Ottawa commuters, and the extended shutdown has a Transit Commission chair thinking about the future. Here's City News reporter Chris Curries.
Allan Hubley has heard about the crowded R1 buses.
It's supposed to be a temporary service brought in for, if the system's down for a couple of days a week. It was never designed to run as long as we're asking it to run in this shutdown. So yes, absolutely, there's been lots of inconveniences.
But he tells City News it's allowed the city to think about potentially buying a few more buses so that service improves if this were to happen again. On this shutdown that's in its 5th week, Hubley says it's critical that they don't start running trains on November 1st and have to shut down again on the 2nd. He adds that he looks forward to more detailed answers on the LRT struggles at tomorrow's Transit Commission meeting. Chris Curries, City News.
And human rights activists accusing the International Olympic Committee of granting legitimacy to abuses in China by allowing the 2022 Winter Games to go ahead in Beijing. They're urging G7 nations, sponsors of the competition, and athletes to boycott what they're calling China's genocide games. Greek officials did hand over the Olympic flame to games organizers today. One activist told reporters they're handing the torch to a host government that is far removed from holding any of the Olympic ideals. The IOC president, Thomas Bach, says the games have to be respected as politically neutral ground. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
It's great to welcome back to the Rob Snow Show on City News. Syndicated columnist Michael Taube, one of his latest columns, appears today in the National Post. It is a farewell to the late Colin Powell. We learned of Colin Powell's passing yesterday. Good morning, Michael.
Hey, Rob, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. It's great to hear from you again this week. Tell us about Colin Powell, because there's a lot of information in there that I think our listeners may not be aware of.
Yeah, sure, certainly. Colin Powell sort of unexpectedly passed away yesterday, and he passed away from COVID-19 complications. Although he was fully vaccinated, he had been treated for blood cancer at Walter Reed National Medical Center, which is in Bethesda, Maryland. It was very unfortunate. Again, he lived a long life at 84 years, but this was not certainly the ending I think he or his family would have expected. But, I mean, the column that I wrote obviously looks back at what Colin Powell meant to the military scene. He was a 4-star general. He was an exceptional soldier, and also what he did as he went on as the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. He served in roles such as Ronald Reagan's National Security Advisor, and most notably, where your listeners would really know it, President George W. Bush's Secretary of State. He was the first African-American to ever hold that position. And it's actually it's an interesting story because, as I write in my column, Colin Powell truly lived the American dream. He was born to working-class parents who had immigrated from Jamaica. His dad was a shipping clerk and his mom was a seamstress.
Wow.
But he worked hard. You know, he didn't necessarily love school in the beginning, but his sister had actually worked very hard at it. So his parents kind of expected him to follow suit, and gradually he did. He ended up with a couple degrees, including an MBA from Georgetown. And really where most people know him, obviously, is through the military. He went to the ROTC. You know, he went through the chain of command, the U.S. Army, pretty fast, and became one of the most successful African-American soldiers, certainly in modern history. And he was aligned and linked up until later in his life, which I'll briefly get into, with the Republican Party. He had written, for the Wall Street Journal a number of years ago that he was in the tradition of what we would call a liberal Republican or a moderate Republican, Rockefeller Republican. There's a whole bunch of labels you can put to it. Okay. But basically a type of Republican that exists in a very small form today, but was more common, say, in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, as he was growing up, which took sort of a middle-of-the-road position. It's like our red Tories. It's very similar to that. And long story short, you know, Colin Powell served the world and the country with great honor and great respect, but near the end of his life, he became mostly very frustrated with the way he saw American conservatism changing, and more specifically, the Republican Party changing, to the point where, you know, famously from 2008 on, he endorsed every single Democrat who ran for president of the United States, including Barack Obama twice, Hillary Clinton, and at the very end, Joe Biden. But, you know, we could waste time looking at that and try to litigate it. It's not necessary. The man had so many great achievements, from the way that he promoted democracy, liberty, and freedom, opposed communism, worked hard for the poor and the disenfranchised. He was a great supporter of humanitarian aid, social justice. He was a magnificent orator. And just from what I have heard, because I never met him, unfortunately, just a kind, generous man who was open to all and happy to speak to every person in the room, whether it was the most important world leader to, say, the janitor on the side of the floor. And that is a fantastic way to be. And I think overall, aside from the fact that he left the political side of the spectrum that I'm on, I think we can be honored by the fact that he led a great life and achieved an enormous amount.
What do you know about how he felt about being the front man for Iraq WMD? I can still picture it in my head. Colin Powell making that pitch at the United Nations with the photographic evidence and everything, you know.
Yeah. No, look, I mean, the presentation itself, obviously, he was able to inspire a lot of people, and he spoke very well. The problem is we found out pretty shortly thereafter, within a few months, the speech had been hurried along. It was basically created in about 4 days, and the evidence that was used to state that WMDs were actually possessed by the Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein turned out to be from faulty evidence. That the sheets they used was from, I forget the age of the person who wrote, a young 20-something-year-old who just wrote, unfortunately, a lot of gobbledygook, trying to create lines in different ways, but without actually proving that anything was there. Regrettably, Colin Powell, you know, based on the fact that he was the front man as the Secretary of State in the Bush administration, you know, sat in the United Nations, tried to make the case. I mean, obviously, if you believe that the war in Iraq was justified, which I do, I'm glad that Saddam Hussein has gone from this world, and we are better off for it, even though Iraq obviously has its own problems. But for him, he always saw it as a blot on his record.
He did.
He always said to the very end it was a painful experience in his life.
Interesting. Okay. What a life lived, though. My gosh, right? Wow.
Absolutely.
Extraordinary. 84 years old. And to the fullest. Okay, let's move along, because this is kind of a developing story today, because Doug Ford was just in the House, and he was asked to apologize by a member of the opposition, Dolly Begum, who is a New Democrat MPP, Scarborough Southwest, official opposition critic for citizenship, foreign credentials, and immigration services for the Ontario New Democrats, the official opposition in the Ontario government. She was calling repeatedly for Doug Ford to apologize for this comment that he made yesterday. Roll the tape, David.
We need people. And so, folks, if you have some hardworking people, I just have one criteria. You come here like every other new Canadian has come here. You work your tail off. If you think you're coming to collect the dole and sit around, not going to happen. Go somewhere else. You want to work? Come here. We have so much work, we can't keep up with it.
All right. Okay, so collect the dole. I haven't heard that word in a long time, collect the dole. But nevertheless, so this was just moments ago. We played it live here on the Rob Snow Show covering the legislature. It wasn't much of an apology. It was New Canadians Love Me. Just come to Ford Fest.
Speaker, all you have to do is come to a Ford Fest. You'll see the support from people around the world that come there. And guess what, Mr. Speaker? I'll tell you how Ford Nation was created. They came to this country. They couldn't get a hold of any NDP Liberal leaders, but they got a hold of the Mayor of Toronto. They got a hold of the Premier. We show up to their door. We return their call.
Okay, all right. Not really an apology, kind of I understand New Canadians, don't you worry, I think was kind of his line, I guess. Michael, what do you think of how all this has unfolded over the last 24 hours?
Yeah, well, I mean, the reference in the House or the Ontario legislature, it sort of goes back to what we know of what was called Ford Nation, or even the Ford Fest, the festivals they held once a year in Etobicoke outside Toronto. Which is basically the fact that when you went to a Ford Fest, and I went to one very briefly.
Okay.
I have seen them, yes. So it was definitely a grand mix of people. There's no question of that. And Doug Ford and his brother, the late Rob Ford, who was the mayor of Toronto at one point, they certainly worked hard to try to be inclusive in their own way. Was it ever perfect? No. But for no one is it ever perfect. The formula was simply that their movement, Ford Nation, or just the philosophy of the Ford brothers, could encompass everyone. It was a very populist political idea and theory, and certainly worked successfully for both of them. The statement itself, I don't have a big issue with it. I think it was crafted poorly. I would certainly agree with that. But regrettably, this is something I've always seen with all due respect to Doug Ford and Rob Ford, both who I've known for years, or I knew Rob Ford a long time. I knew Doug Ford even longer. Like them both. But unfortunately, they occasionally bring or craft statements or say things on the fly that just leave things dangling, I think is the nicest way to put it. Because what he's trying to really say, if you look at the statement, you parse it, he's saying, if you come here like New Canadians do and you work hard, that's exactly what we want in the society. We want people to succeed. I think any provincial premier, any prime minister, any world leader would say the same thing. We encourage immigration, which the Fords always have, and we want them to work hard, as hopefully other people do who've lived in the country for a long time. The problem is, as you said, when you start using terms like collect the dole and sit around, yes, in theory,
you're just leaving it. You're leaving yourself wide open to being
exactly. That's the problem.
Yeah. Okay, you're a baseball fan?
I am.
You are. Yeah, I see you tweeting about the playoffs. It's amazing. I'm kind of a fair weather baseball fan now. I'm in it when the Jays are in it, but then the Jays are out.
I'm a Yankees fan.
I lose all. Oh, you're a Yankees fan. Okay. Okay. Well, when in 1981, I was 10 years old, and I had Gary Carter posters on my wall, right, in my house. So it was today. The Montreal Gazette, I was reading the Gazette this morning, reminded me of my darkest day as a young Expos fan. 40 years since Blue Monday. Do you remember Blue Monday?
Yeah, of course I do. I was 11 years old. I watched that game on TV. Okay. I remember. You and I are similar in age, but sure. Yeah. I do remember it. Now, even though I'm a fan of the evil empire, and I know obviously you've lost a whole bunch of listeners, I'm sorry to begin with. I didn't mean to cost Rob some good people, but no, I remember this very well. Yeah, Rick Monday on a Monday. It was one of the worst episodes of a Montreal Expos team, with the exception of the '94 squad. If that season had not been shortened, actually your Expos and my Yankees would probably have met in the World Series. They were both powerhouses that season. This was the closest the Expos ever came to getting to the World Series, and it was frustrating. The series had been very tight. They played the Dodgers really close. Each game in itself was pretty close overall. This one really, really hurt. And it wasn't, with all due respect to Rick Monday, who was a good player for the LA Dodgers. He gave them many good seasons. It was a shocking moment. And for a lot of Montreal Expos fans like yourself, it was heartbreaking.
Well, I mean, it was the decision to put Steve Rogers in as a relief pitcher, right? Like it's... Well, I get it. I've done like interviews with the people who have written the books on this, and they're like, well, Rob, he was the best picture in the game at the time. You know,
it's like putting Max Scherzer in, as they did recently. You know, you do get moments like this, and no, I think that the move. I mean, yes, in hindsight, it was a mistake, but at the time, it didn't look illogical. But look, you know, the one good thing that you have, Rob, and I didn't mean to interrupt,
is that
when the Tampa Bay Rays come to Montreal and you merge the team in the friendly two cities, you'll have lots of great things to be glad about.
I was just looking up the 1981 Montreal Expos.
Yeah.
Opening day. Gary Carter, Warren Cromartie, Andre Dawson.
Yeah.
Larry Parrish, Tim Raines, Steve Rogers, Rodney Scott, Chris Spire, and Ellis Valentine, and they even break down the payroll. I mean, Tim Raines is in the Hall of Fame now in Cooperstown.
He deserves to be. Yeah.
Tim Raines in 1981 made $35,000.
I did not remember that. Oh, God. Slightly undervalued, even with money being the way it was in the 80s.
And the highest paid player on the Montreal Expos that season was Andre Dawson, and he made $1 million even.
Which was good in those days.
Yeah,
it sounds ridiculous now. I agree.
Yeah.
But look, salary levels are different, and obviously our currency is different too. But no, that was a good franchise. And I didn't remember. I'm glad you read it out. I didn't remember heart for heart, but I remember all those players, and several of them, as you said, are in the Hall of Fame, and deservedly so. And many of them had great seasons. You know, Dawson had some great seasons. Raines, Valentine. I mean, that was a real Larry Parrish. I can't ignore. That was a really strong team. And again, it's one of those things. What if? You know, had things been a little different, Rob, you never know what would have happened.
Yeah. Hey, lots of fun this week. Thank you so much, Michael. We'll talk soon.
My pleasure.
Yeah,
Take care.
bye-bye. Michael Taube, syndicated columnist. Read his column about Colin Powell. It's in today's National Post. This is City News.
I'm blessed to be married to someone who is a scientist and spent a lot of time following what was happening over in China ahead of time. So he did give us the heads up that this was coming. Not that we believed him right off the bat, but when it did happen very, very quickly, we were prepared. We had hand sanitizer and we were set up to not close our doors. So we locked the kitchen down at Wellington Street, but we left this kitchen open. We put in protocols immediately. We only allowed our very small crew of 4 or 5 people in at the time. No deliveries were allowed to come in or out of the building without, they just weren't allowed in and out of the building. So we met them at the loading dock and had very strict protocols in place right away. We had masks and hand sanitizer and the whole thing. So we're very lucky from that perspective, and we're able to, learn as we went as far as doing small, individually packed caterings, the frozen soup program, food for the Ottawa mission. So we didn't have to close the kitchen and then learn how to reopen it. We just were able to modify and shift as we needed to. Because of our partnership with the Ottawa mission, we were able to very quickly help support them. They were able to send us some product and some supplies, so it wasn't a burden on our business, and we were able to supply the staffing and the packaging to help produce that when they needed it the most. And we produced about 1,400 meals a week to complement their meals, and we started our soup program right away. We realized very quickly that there was a need in the community to get together and all work together, not only to support local, but also just to support all the people that were suddenly in a position of, being locked down and not being able to get out. So by starting that soup program, our community, our clients got online and started making donations for the soups. And we were able to produce the soups and get them back out to people that needed it. We're right now currently making 150 liters of soup per week, but we've made, I would say, 5,000 or 6,000, easily since the pandemic. Probably more. I'd have to do the math, but lots. I think everybody in the city has to be very aware of how blessed we were to have great weather this summer and people were able to get out and about, and that's going to shift. So we do have to be much more aware of who our most vulnerable is, and I really think we have to work together as groups. There are so many organizations in the city that are doing something and contributing and working together, and I think it doesn't matter who, but see what you can do to just step up and help them, whatever it is, whether it's driving or delivering food, or someone has extra zucchini in their garden, or if they can afford to donate some money to any of these organizations. I just think we all have to work together. We're smarter and wiser than we were the first time.
On Rogers TV and City News,
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Pfizer is asking Health Canada to approve the first COVID-19 vaccine for children, age 5 to 11 years old. So let's go over what's involved with this. Dr. Gerald Evans, chair of the Division of Infectious Diseases at Queen's University, joins me this morning on City News. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, it's nice to hear from you. What would go into an application to a regulator like this one?
Well, really, basically two major pieces of information. How effective is it at preventing COVID-19 in that age group between 5 and 11? And, of course, the safety data. What's happened with recipients of the vaccine when you compare them to ones that didn't receive the vaccine, because these are done with placebo, so about half the group would get a placebo vaccine, in other words, something that's inert, and the others would get the vaccine. So those are the two principal issues they're looking at. And, of course, they review some data about dose size, et cetera, and they measure a number of parameters, including, how high do antibodies go after receiving the vaccine.
Okay. So the data that would be submitted to the regulator, where would that come? Would the data come from all the doses given to all the grown-ups? or would they have been running, say, a trial on children this age?
Yeah, no, these are specifically related to a trial done within that age group. So they would have enrolled only subjects between age 5 and 11. The data that we've seen in the adults, which of course has already been reviewed and looked at many months ago, that's not relevant to this application at the moment.
So you couldn't extrapolate the experience with people over the age of 12 and apply it to, say, a childhood vaccine regimen, for example?
Not necessarily. Although one of the things they are looking at is the issue of some of the very uncommon adverse effects that we're seeing in that age 12 to say 18-year-old age group. Is that also being seen in the 5 to 11-year-olds, because at least they're that close in age? But children are not just little adults; they're actually children, and so you have to look at the data specifically within that group.
Okay. So the polling data, public opinion research, we have plenty of it, and it does show kind of a serious level of concern among parents out there. The most recent poll says it's about 50-50. 50% of parents surveyed say they're comfortable having their children vaccinated against COVID-19. The other half are not. How legitimate are the concerns, in your opinion, Doc?
Well, we have to look at all of the safety data that's being generated, and right now what we know a lot about is the efficacy. In other words, how well it works at protecting kids. And in that data, some of which has been released preliminarily, it looks very impressive, as you would expect for any vaccine in kids. The safety data is what the regulators are going to be looking at very carefully and dissecting it apart, ensuring they have adequate numbers to be able to say that, they can make a good determination of what that safety signal is. But the poll really represents a very typical thing that we see across the spectrum. And, making a decision to take the vaccine for yourself as a 30 or 40-year-old is can be a bit challenging, but I mean, I don't think it is, because I know how effective and safe these vaccines are. Right. But when all of a sudden your decision is influencing your child, that's where people become, a little bit trepidatious is probably a best way to put it. They become a little bit worried because they're responsible for that child. And so that's why you see this kind of very much a schism of 50-50 between those that are ready to get on and protect their kids and the other ones who are just a little bit worried and want to see that safety data.
Typically, when it comes to the efficacy of vaccines, do children react differently? Do they have a better immune response than an adult, or is it about the same?
That's a great question, and the answer is they absolutely do.
They have a better immune response.
A much better immune response. You see that across the board with almost all vaccines that are looked at. I mean, I can remember many years ago looking at the HPV data. That's the human papillomavirus vaccine that's now given to younger children and adolescents. And the immune response you get in a younger person is immensely greater than you see. And it's a gradient. As you get older and older, that immune response just diminishes. So kids are great to give vaccines to because they develop these vigorous, strong immune responses and are well protected.
Okay. When it comes to dosing, is it fair to assume there will be childhood doses versus adult doses? Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes?
So what we know about the childhood vaccine, Rob, is that so the adult one from Pfizer has 30 micrograms of mRNA, but the pediatric dose has 10 micrograms, so it's 1/3 the size of the adult dose.
Okay. Very interesting. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very
welcome. Great to have the information today. Yes, Dr. Gerald Evans is chair of the Division of Infectious Diseases at Queen's University. Coming up from CityNews, investigative journalist Cristina Howorun on her new series that starts airing at 10 o'clock. It's called Fighting Traffic. Her investigative series on the scourge of human trafficking. That's right after the news on CityNews.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, October 19th. Good morning. I'm Alex Gouge. Right now in Ottawa, it's 8 and mostly cloudy, and it's also 8 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news this hour. Ontario health officials are reporting 328 new cases of COVID-19 today, including 4 deaths linked to the virus. This includes 20 new infections in Ottawa, 2 in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, and 1 in Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark. No cases are being reported in Renfrew County today. Over 20,000 tests were conducted, bringing the positivity rate to 1.5%. Health Minister Christine Elliott says most Ontarians can get their flu shots next month, but people at higher risks can get them now. Long-term care residents and hospital patients have been able to get them since last month, and Elliott says flu shots are now available for people most at risk for complications. That includes seniors, children older than 6 months and younger than 5, pregnant women, and people with underlying health conditions such as asthma, heart disease, or diabetes. Starting next month, all Ontarians can get a flu shot through a doctor and nurse practitioner's office, pharmacies, and health units. Stand Against Transphobia held a rally this morning that started just before 9. They are countering a person on Broadview who argues children do not have the capacity to make a decision on their own gender. Councillors Catherine McKenney and Jeff Leeper were among those protesting the protesters. City News Time, 11:31. I'm Alex Gouge. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So this whole stretch is big for trafficking.
Every day in Canada, someone somewhere is being trafficked for sex.
You see the window next to the staircase? That's the bedroom.
It happened to me out of that room.
I was a different kid when I left that room. I was totally broken.
The criminals are almost never brought to justice.
The girls don't go to the police because they're too scared to.
I got punched in the face. I got kicked.
I could see the blood swirling down the drain.
Hey, are you staying here?
But there are people working outside of the system.
That's too close to danger. We could lose her.
Fighting to save lives.
Look at this. She's trapped in her room.
Against impossible odds.
I'm with Cristina Howorun, and we've got a situation here.
We believe trafficking is happening in this hotel right this second.
It's called Fighting Traffic. It has nothing to do with rush hour. It has everything to do with giving you the inside story on human trafficking in Canada. It's the latest investigative series from City News investigative journalist Cristina Howorun, and it starts airing next Tuesday all across the country. Cristina joins me again this morning on City News. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
It seems to be so much more pervasive than I was aware. No community seems spared. I was struck by this detail in one of your reports from London, Ontario, quoting here. The London Abused Women's Centre saw 1,220 unique human trafficking victims between January of 2020 and June 30th of 2021. 1,220 victims in a year and a half in just one of their programs. During that same time period, London police only laid 28 trafficking charges. 1,200 victims, 28 charges. So you've spoken to many experts for this series. It seems to be a crime that so often goes unreported. Why?
Well, there's a lot of reasons that it goes unreported. A lot of times the traffickers have a very strong hold, and I'm going to say women because overwhelmingly the victims are women and girls. It's about 90 to 95%. So they have such a strong hold on these women and girls. And sometimes it's a drug addiction, but most times it's fear and violence. So I'll give you an example. A 16-year-old girl who is with her boyfriend, who after a couple of weeks and months convinces her and manipulates her to perhaps sleep with a friend to pay off one of his debts. And then now she's already done it, so she should continue to do it. She may as well, otherwise he'll leave her. So she does it a couple more times. She tries a few more times. She wants to get out, and he says, "You can't. I know where your little brother goes to school. I know where your parents live. I'm going to hurt them." It's a fear-based crime. So even though he may not be violent with her, she is so scared and she is so much under his control that she literally has invisible handcuffs. Now, don't get me wrong, Rob. A lot of these women and girls are beaten. There's a lot of violence that's going on, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it's just an obscene amount of manipulation and fear.
Who are the traffickers? Who is involved in this crime? Organized crime, strangers, boyfriends?
Organized crime is definitely involved. The Stats Canada predicts that it's about 50%, and those are similar stats to what we've seen with police. But the Romeo pimp, so this is the boyfriend that I was talking about earlier, somebody that takes a young girl or a woman and convinces her that this is the best way to, they're doing this for their future, or they're doing this for X, Y, Z. And that tends to be about 50% as well. So some of them do have organized crime links. And we know that about 90% of all victims actually know their trafficker. So they could have a business relationship with them. It could be a teacher. I've met women who have gone through that. It could be a neighbor who's just trying to help them earn a few dollars, and quickly that money becomes all of theirs. So it's not some big Russian spy or somebody bringing people over from Asia and bringing them over in crates, because almost 100% of the victims are actually domestic. No, and they're Canadian or, permanent residents. They're settled here.
As you mentioned, I'm sorry, Cristina.
No, that's okay.
Overwhelmingly a crime against women, right?
Yeah.
Overwhelming, 90% or so, right?
Yeah.
What about Indigenous women? We had the missing and murdered Indigenous women inquiry, of course. What about Indigenous women? Are they overrepresented as victims of this crime?
So that's the interesting thing, is that we know that they are.
Okay.
But because the stats are based on police-reported incidents, and most women, Indigenous or settlers, don't actually go to the police, we don't have a breakdown from police. We do know that service agencies tend to see more Indigenous women, and what they've learned are that the women are trafficked after they leave often remote communities. So they come to the big city or to the city because they're trying to pursue post-secondary education, or because there's more employment opportunities, and that's where they tend to be trafficked from. So they're not trafficked necessarily, or overwhelmingly, they're not trafficked out of the reserves or out of remote communities, but it happens to them, and they are unfairly targeted, or targeted. Everybody's unfairly targeted, but targeted when they arrive in the city.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions. How does a victim get caught up in a human trafficking ring, or involved with a human trafficker? What is there some kind of typical MO with a human trafficker that you came across during your investigation?
Really, it's the Romeo pimp. And this happened to a woman who was 35 when she started being trafficked. It was a great guy, and he loved her so much. And one day he lost his job, and the next day it was, could you go please, we need some cash fast, and can you just go dance at a gentleman's club and try and make us some fast money so we can pay our rent and get another place and all of that. And she does it for love, and next thing you know, she's got a quota, and every night she has to bring home $500 or she'll be beat. And so she ends up doing things that she doesn't want to do, and things that she feels she has to do because she's being beaten. We know that with younger women, typically like those that are in high school or in college or university, they're really trying, we know that some girls were picked up from a fast food joint. So they're working the front desk. A guy comes in, oh, you're too pretty to be working here. Why don't you come out with me and hang out with me for a couple of nights? No, my parents are going to come. Okay, I'll come. Tell them you're working till 9 tomorrow, and I'll be here at 6. Takes her out, shows her a nice time. She's 16 and young and impressionable. She starts hanging out with him. He might give her some drugs, and it sounds so crazy. It sounds like out of a movie, but this is really what's happening. Gives her a little bit of cocaine. Next thing you know, she's servicing his friends and part of his stable, so to speak, because a lot of these traffickers don't just have one woman or girl. They have a stable of women that they are working with. Some of them go home every night to their parents. Some of them stay with them and start running away with their trafficker and running a circuit up and down the 401 from Windsor through to Montreal, going back and forth and staying in Ottawa for 4 or 5 days, heading down the road and staying in Kingston for a couple. So there really isn't just one way, but what tends to be the most frequently seen, at least these days, is the Romeo pimp.
Okay. On the law enforcement side, say with a typical metropolitan police force, who is investigating this crime? Do they have dedicated units, like the Toronto Police or the Ottawa Police? How do they launch an investigation, or how do they investigate this from a law enforcement perspective?
So Ottawa Police does have a human trafficking unit, or a dedicated human trafficking unit. And so do most major metropolitan police services. A lot of times it's a pretty small unit. And so they tend to rely on John stings. And that's where they would put out an ad purporting to be a woman or girl that's selling sexual services, and they wait for the guy, which is overwhelmingly a man. They wait for the John to show up and they charge, and that's sex purchasing, because that tends to be the best way to combat trafficking. Is if you get the John, you reduce supply, because people become very concerned about being caught by police. So that's one typical way. Other ways is they really need people, and it might be the trafficking victim, but it might be the trafficking victim's teacher, friend, parent, sister, brother, somebody that reaches out to them and says, hey, this is happening. Because a lot of times victims who are survivors, because in order to live through this day to day, you are really just struggling to survive. They are so scared. A lot of people don't know that it's no longer illegal to sell sex. So they will tell these women and girls, well, if you go to the police, you're going to end up in jail because you've been selling sex, and that's illegal. It isn't. What's illegal is to buy it, or to profit off of selling somebody else's sexual services, or to force somebody to be selling sexual services. So the women and the survivors and the victims, they really don't have anything to fear by going to the police. But the trafficker will make sure that they believe that they will end up in jail or that they will end up facing charges. So the onus isn't just on the victim, but police really do depend on the people that surround that victim to come forward.
Cristina Howorun is with me, investigative reporter with CityNews. Her latest investigative series examines the scourge of human trafficking in Canada, and the corridors you are reporting identify several so-called human trafficking corridors. What are these main routes for the perpetrators of human trafficking?
Well, like we just said, it's the 401.
The 401, okay.
And Southern Ontario is one of the most common routes. So quite literally from Windsor through to London, maybe a stop in Niagara Falls for a few days, and then you just keep going all the way out to Ottawa and head out to Montreal. You might even make it out to the East Coast. We know that Moncton, according to the survivors that we've spoken to and with some of the advocates, tends to see more, for example, than Halifax, because Halifax, I guess in Nova Scotia, gentlemen's clubs are much more restrictive, so they tend to ship more girls to Moncton. Then we know that in the West Coast, or in the western part of Ontario or Canada, in Alberta, there's a big run that, between Edmonton and you've got Fort McMurray, and because that's, we've got a lot of people that are working there, that don't have family there, that are earning relatively good incomes and have nothing to do. That's a big stretch to be sending girls. And Winnipeg, which kind of surprised me. Winnipeg, and we know this just by looking at the ads that we were tracking, Winnipeg escorts charge, for some reason, I guess the demand is such that when we go through their ads, they're charging rates that are much higher than Ottawa or Montreal, for example. So Winnipeg is definitely a big part of it.
Your last series was about guns.
Yes.
Smuggled guns.
Yes.
And there's a comment in your latest series that it's easier to traffic in humans in Canada than guns, actually. That's what the criminals are saying, right, Cristina?
Well, yeah. I believe the quote's from Megan Walker, who has been working in this space for quite some time, but it's true. Because as she's pointed out, you can find a woman or a girl in any mall, in any park, online, on Facebook and Twitter, and just Snapchat, and just trying to reach out people that are lonely, that have self-esteem issues, and it doesn't cost you anything. Taking them out on a quick date to McDonald's even, or to somewhere nicer, it doesn't really cost you much. You're not going to the States and, risking something with, your car filled with guns.
Right.
Women don't cost a lot, as she's pointed out. And their upkeep is very minimal. $250,000. Rob, that's how much they estimate one victim can bring in for the trafficker every year. $250,000.
Wow.
It's lunacy.
The women who have managed to escape this.
Yes.
How do they do that?
Honestly, I'll tell you that one of the women I spoke with, it took her several times. The first time she tried to leave, she got all of her toes broken. when she got found by her trafficker. And he just started bringing men to her motel rooms so she didn't even have to walk. It took her several times, and she ended up having other parts of her body amputated in the process. Other women, I know that Morgan, she's a young, college-educated, beautiful girl next door, and this happened to her. And she was lucky enough that she reached out for help and developed a plan to get out before she got too far in, where she pretended that she was going to visit family because of a funeral or something like that. So her trafficker would let her leave because she was still fairly new, and she went to the police, and that's when they laid their arrest. But a lot of times when the women do leave, they're leaving with just the clothes on their backs. They're not leaving with much else, because in some cases, the trafficker has taken their identification. That's what happened to Caroline. She didn't have anything. She literally left with the clothes on her back. And she got to a Salvation Army, and they took her in and kept her there for a couple of weeks until she could kind of sort things out. Okay. But it's very difficult to leave. And sometimes you just don't have the finances to do it.
It's called Fighting Traffic. Starts airing next Tuesday.
Right. It's a 1-hour documentary. It airs Tuesday night at 10 p.m. on City TV.
Thank you, Cristina.
Thank you, Rob. Always such a pleasure.
Cristina Howorun from City News. This is the Rob Snow Show. We'll be right back with the Ontario Liberal leader, Stephen Del Duca, on City News.
An old-fashioned traditional grocery store. You're going to find a butcher, okay? You want a steak cut a certain way, you're going to get it. You know, there's flour piled in the warehouse. There's mixers on the floor. There's flour on the floor. The bakery's rented out to Frank Nicolo. It's him and his son come in at night. They mix the dough, they roll the dough, and they bake the dough. It's not the traditional frozen and thaw and put it in the bin, okay? It's made from scratch 7 days a week. It's probably the only bakery left in Ottawa that does that. You know, then customer service. You know, we're big on that. The cashiers, the deli. You're not. If you ask for something, they're not going to point. It's an aisle number 7. They're going to bring you there. Okay. If you have too much groceries out, we'll take it out to your car. You know what I mean? There's nothing we don't do for our customers, and we evolved around our customers. They would come in and say, you know, can you try getting me this? You know, can you get me this? So that's how we built the lineup we have now. Okay. So we have a lot of unique items that someone that came over to, you know, live in Canada hasn't seen this particular product, but we sourced it and we have it for them that, you know, like something they used to have as a kid. We have a lot of those unique items, a lot, you know, from like all over the world. And we source it through, you know, distributors in Montreal and Toronto that bring in the product in bulk, and we piggyback off of them. Probably the largest European deli in Ottawa. We sell lots because people buy lots. It's nothing really complicated about that. You know, we turn over a lot of product. You know, we package it properly. We buy, and we're always consistent. You know, you're always going to buy, you know, Cuddy turkey breast. You know, San Daniel mortadella. You're always going to get the same brands. We don't flip back and forth to save 20 cents. It's always the same brands the last 29 years. Best sandwiches in town. It's simple. It starts off with fresh bread every day baked in the store. Anything that's left over goes to breadcrumbs. So you're getting a fresh bun every day that was baked probably 4 hours before you get here. Okay? Not only baked, made. Like, you know, mix the flour, roll the dough, proof the bread, and bake the bread. Okay? Then all the ingredients come right off the shelves. You know, your lettuce, your tomatoes, all your condiments, and they're cut up fresh in the deli. Not like the big, you know, corporate restaurant chains that your lettuce comes in shredded in a bag. You open it up and you throw it in the bin. You know, takes, you know, 2 or 3 days to get here from California. How long is it in the bag? The big difference is like making a sandwich at home, and you don't have to do the work. It's really what the trick is, and using the freshest ingredients possible.
Strong opinions.
Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Leader of Ontario Liberal Party. The leader of the Ontario Liberal Party is Stephen Del Duca. He's back with me on City News this morning. Good morning, Mr. Del Duca.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, it's nice to hear from you. Thanks for the time. Greatly appreciated. We're going to play a clip from yesterday. Premier Ford talking about new Canadians and our job vacancies here in Ontario and the power of immigration to fill some of those job vacancies, but then things didn't go quite according to the plan. Let's go.
People. Okay. And so, folks, if you have some hardworking people, I just have one criteria. You come here like every other new Canadian has come here, you work your tail off. If you think you're coming to collect the dole and sit around, not going to happen. Go somewhere else. You want to work? Come here. We have so much work, we can't keep up with it.
Okay. What is your reaction to that as the Liberal leader in Ontario?
Listen, I am the Liberal leader. I'm also the son of immigrants and grandson of immigrants. Rob, for the life of me, I can't understand why Doug Ford would choose that kind of language. Even if I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, and we have lots of job openings here, especially in the trades, and we do, and there is a gap there that we've got to fill. There's just such a better way and a more competent and compassionate and responsible way to say that without making it seem like you're casting doubt on the work ethic of some immigrants, which feeds into so many outdated stereotypes that it's deeply disappointing. Premiers are supposed to try to unite us, not divide us further, and I hope he apologizes, and I hope he smartens up.
Okay, so he was asked by a New Democrat MPP representing Scarborough Southwest, Dolly Begum, official opposition critic, Citizenship, Foreign Credentials, Immigration Services, asked to apologize. Mr. Ford, will you apologize? This was during the question period in the legislature this morning, and this is part of what the Premier said in his response.
So my question is simple, Mr. Speaker. Will the Premier apologize for his reckless comments?
Premier on his feet. Seems prepared to apologize.
The Premier to reply.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Speaker. Let me just inform the opposition. I am pro-immigration. I have been pro-immigration from day one. We are short 290,000 people. I was the only government that wrote letter after letter to the Prime Minister saying we need more people. But
okay, so then things got all interrupted and there was a lot of heckling going on in the House, and then they picked it up after that, after the Speaker told everybody to be quiet.
All you have to do is come to a Ford Fest. You'll see the support from people around the world that come there. And guess what, Mr. Speaker? I'll tell you how Ford Nation was created. They came to this country. They couldn't get a hold of any NDP Liberal leaders, but they got a hold of the Mayor of Toronto. They got a hold of the Premier. We show up to their door. We return their call.
Okay. So he defends his record with new Canadians, Mr. Del Duca. What do you think?
Well, I'm not surprised that he would defend his record. And as I said a second ago, I think I am to an extent prepared to give anybody the benefit of the doubt. But I think it's really important for leaders to remember words have an impact.
Okay.
And I just think he could have shown and should have shown better judgment and should have chosen language that stressed the need to fill the gaps we have in places like the skilled trades, both domestically and internationally with an immigration system. We are a country and a province of immigrants, without even inadvertently casting doubt using a very outdated concept that somehow some immigrants are lazy. That's not been my experience. We need the workers, there's no doubt about it, but leaders have to lead, including using the right and responsible words, and Doug Ford failed that test yesterday.
Okay. So you recently delivered a speech to the Liberal Party's annual general meeting, is that right? North York, North York, yes?
Yeah, on Sunday, this past Sunday.
Okay, and you're proposing ranked ballots and giving that option to municipalities, reinstating that as an option for municipal elections. How would something like that work, Mr. Del?
Well, I mean, the funny part is here in Ontario, Rob, we had that option in place with legislation that we had passed as a government before 2018. And the City of London here in Ontario chose to go forward using ranked ballots in their local 2018 election. They chose to use it. It worked well. They elected their mayor and council using a ranked ballot, and then Doug Ford canceled that option for municipalities several months ago for unclear reasons. And so he took that step backwards. I said at the time, and I've repeated this past Sunday, I would reinstate that option for municipalities. It's pretty straightforward. It worked in the City of London, not forcing it on municipalities, just giving them the option.
Okay. And You would also explore doing a pilot program for a 4-day work week? How would something like that operate?
Yeah, that was the other commitment that I'd made. I think the nature of work in this province has changed and evolved and improved through many, many years. And so I think we've seen during the pandemic the way people interact with their work or employment situations has also changed. More and more people working harder, falling further and further behind. Mental health challenges, worker productivity is dropping. Family life is being impacted in a bad way. So we see other places in the world that have taken a look at the 4-day work week. Some private companies here in Ontario have already gone down this path. I said, if I win the election next year, I'll deploy a pilot project in Ontario, looking at all sectors, looking at all regions, want to keep it open, want to keep it inclusive, and want to make sure that we gather the evidence and facts before we make any big decisions in a responsible way.
Okay. Mr. Del Duca, thank you for the time, sir. Great to hear from you.
My pleasure, Rob.
Yeah, bye-bye. Stephen Del Duca is the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party. And that's it for the Rob Snow Show. Back tomorrow, right after the 9 o'clock news. Sam LaPratte is standing by with her show right after the noon news here on City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
Weekdays 9 to noon on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley.
2021 has seen more changes in This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.